Slazokamati Omateo. I call this meeting on Monday, May 19th, 2025, at 7:03 p.m. I'll start off with our land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognized that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationship with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. City Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Hanson Romero.
Here.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember Mickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor McQuay. Here. And Mayor Lopez.
Here. All right, we will move on to ceremonial matters. We have a handful of proclamations, and we will start off with the Asian American Pacific Islanders Heritage Month to be read by Councilmember Mickey and to be received by representative from our parent group, I believe Kathy and Yoon. If you would like, you're more than welcome to step up to receive.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
City of Albany Proclamation in recognition of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, May 2025. Whereas the City of Albany is committed to providing comprehensive support to ensure an equitable, safe, and welcoming environment to all people, and whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, AAPI, Heritage Month is observed during the month of May to recognize the contributions and influences of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to the history, culture, and achievements of the United States. And whereas AAPI are comprised of more than 23 distinct Asian American and 19 distinct Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander subgroups, AAPI range from new immigrants to fourth generation or more descendants, and have distinct stories of historical trauma and immigration settlement experiences, and is one of the fastest growing racial and ethnic minority groups in the U.S., with California being the home of the largest AA population and second largest NHPI population. And whereas the first AAPIs to arrive to the U.S. are Filipinos to Morro Bay, California in 1587, and whereas the first Chinatown was established in 1848 in San Francisco, California, and whereas 20,000 Chinese immigrants worked on the Transcontinental Railroad between 1836 and 1869, and Punjabis worked on the Western Pacific Railways in Northern California between 1903 and 1908. And whereas on October 5th, 1978, President Jimmy Carter signed a law that designated the first 7 days of May as Asian Pacific American Heritage Week to acknowledge America's first Japanese immigrants to arrive in the U.S. in May of 1843 and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, much of which were built by Chinese immigrants in May of 1869. And whereas President George H.W. Bush issued Presidential Proclamation 6130 on May 7, 1990, designating May 1990 as the first Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and whereas the state of California celebrated Fred Korematsu Day, January 30th, the first day named after an Asian American. And whereas for more than a century, Asian American and Pacific Islander folks have made valuable contributions to all areas of life, including government, business, technology, advances, arts and sciences, medicine, education, law enforcement, and the military. And whereas these contributions were critical during the COVID-19 pandemic, where AAPI, in particular immigrant AAPIs, stood unwavering on the front line as essential workers in healthcare, in the food industries at farms, meat processing factories, grocery stores, and restaurants, in education as childcare workers and teachers, and in pharmaceutical and biomedical industry. And whereas the City of Albany is proud its Asian American and Pacific Islander population, approximately 30% of the city demographics, that contribute greatly to the prosperity and enrichment of our city. And whereas Asian American Pacific Islanders have established a wide range of services to shape the growth of the City of Albany through educational, personal service, real estate, arts and culture, fitness and movement, retail, and a host of restaurants. And whereas we recognize our AAPI elected appointed officials, past and present, who have championed for a wide range of topics in Albany, including but not limited to climate policy, education, mental health awareness, LGBTQIA+ advocacy, transportation, accessible parks, and the local economy. And whereas diversity represents one of our greatest strengths, and by recognizing the contributions and accomplishments of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander folks, our city celebrates the importance of inclusion to building a brighter future for all our citizens. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City of Albany does hereby declare May 2025 as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and the City of Albany celebrates by calling upon its residents to honor Asian Pacific Americans and learn more about the history of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's honored to be here representing broad community in AAPI. It's my 21st year in the Bay Area, and also 17 years in Albany. It's very honored to represent the community here today, and really appreciate all the inclusiveness and the diversity in this great small community. Thanks.
Thanks, Yun. She is also our incoming Vice President of the Albany High School PTSA School Board. So big kudos to you. Yes. Welcome her. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the history of the proclamation, because it is important that we do remember, otherwise we are doomed to repeat history. So that being said, I think it might be a good idea to figure out, I remembered Googling or AIing, there are 2 families that were taken from Albany to be in the concentration camps during the Japanese internment era. It would be nice to get to know who they were, where did they live, and do as the Germans did for the families taken by the Nazis, put a placard on their house. What were their names? Who were they? Were their children, and what were their age? It's good to at least follow what the Germans did so we don't repeat that, especially with the era of our current president. So that's just a suggestion. I don't know if Albany has a budget to do that, but I really appreciate you recognizing us. Mayor Lopez, Vice Mayor McQuaid, council members, really appreciate you. But on a lighter note, I was actually thinking about my Asianness, because I grew up in a podunk part of the country, really small town in Pennsylvania, where there were more cows than people. I was the only Asian in my class of 273. A lot of times, my eyes are in my head, sticking out, and I forget that I'm Asian until somebody tells me that my English is really good. I'm like, oh, thanks, that's really nice. Your English is pretty good too. Then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, okay, I actually don't look what most people at that part of the country considers American. So that's what I really appreciate about Albany, is it really doesn't matter what color is your skin, what color is your hair, where you're from, because we're all considered citizens of Albany. And I really appreciate all of you looking out for our interests and figuring out what's best for us, because just a few decades ago, I would not have been allowed to buy the house that I live in because I'm Asian. And that's a really chilling piece of history to remember also. So thank you so much for your time, your kind attention, and your presence in recognizing us.
Thank you.
So I can't speak to the 2 families that were taken, but I know that my understanding is one of the families was Jewel Okawachi's family. And Jewel was a 2-time council member, so served 2 terms and served on many of our commissions and volunteered in many of our community organizations. And Jewel Terrace Park is named after her.
Again, thank you very much for being here this evening to receive the proclamation. We'll move on to our next proclamation to be read by Vice Mayor McQuaid for Jewish American Heritage Month. And I believe our representative from the parent group couldn't be in person tonight. They may be tapping in virtually.
City of Albany proclamation in recognition of Jewish American Heritage Month, May 2025. Whereas Jewish Americans have been an important part of the American story and have contributed to all areas of American life and culture since our nation's earliest days. And whereas on April 30th, 2006, President George W. Bush proclaimed May as Jewish American Heritage Month, stating, "As a nation of immigrants, the United States is better and stronger because Jewish people from all over the world have chosen to become American citizens." And since then, proclamations in support of Jewish American Heritage Month have been made by presidents of the United States annually. And whereas generations of Jews fled to the United States in search of a better life for themselves and their families, and those immigrants made invaluable contributions in support of equality and civil rights through their leadership and achievements. And whereas Jewish Americans connect to their Jewish identity in a variety of ways, such as culturally, ethnically, religiously, and by following Jewish ethics and values. And whereas Jewish Americans are racially, ethnically, socially, politically, and economically diverse, and whereas in recent years, Jewish Americans have increasingly experienced anti-Semitism, including but not limited to physical attacks, vandalism, verbal and physical harassment, and hateful comments posted on social media. And whereas the City of Albany recognizes our obligation to condemn and combat anti-Semitism wherever it exists, to include Jewish Americans in all facets of civic life, and to stand with the Jewish American community against hatred or bigotry in our city and country. And whereas there is a need for education and policies that are culturally competent when describing, discussing, or addressing the impacts of being Jewish in all aspects of American society, including discourse and policy. And whereas we celebrate the rich and diverse heritage of the Jewish American community, including those who live, work, and play in Albany. And whereas we recognize Jewish American commitment to civic engagement. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Albany City Council hereby declares the month of May as Jewish American Heritage Month in appreciation of the achievements and contributions made by members of the Jewish community, and calls upon all residents to celebrate Jewish Americans who have woven the fabric of our community and our country, and supports opportunities to learn more about Jewish American history and culture. And be it further proclaimed that the City of Albany will continue efforts to confront anti-Semitism and other forms of hate impacting the Jewish community, support local education about the diversity of our Jewish American community, and integrate Jewish American culture into future programs, activities, and ceremonies throughout the year. Signed, Robin Lopez, Mayor. And we have with us on Zoom.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yafid is here from the Jewish Parent Engagement Group to address us.
Thank you so much, Vice Mayor. It is an honor for me to be here and represent the Jewish community in Albany. My name is Yafid Shriki Megidish. I'm a mother of 4 children in the Albany schools and the coordinator of the JPEG. Thank you for having me today. The Jewish Parent Engagement Group is proud to support Jewish students and families in feeling connected to, proud of, and safe in their Jewish identity. Throughout the year, we invested our energy into creating meaningful spaces for celebration and education. Highlights includes organizing holiday events, creating and delivering care packages for senior citizens in the community, and bringing a Holocaust survivor to the high school to share their story and the meaningful lessons that we can take from them. We also ordered new books for school to help enrich readers with information about Jewish culture and communities around the world, thanks to the generous support and funding from AUSD. In addition, we have worked to be a resource for family and support with any issues that occurred in schools around their Jewish identity, with the importance of noticing anti-Semitism and taking care of it immediately. The month of May is the Jewish American Heritage Month. It is a time to celebrate and the contribution and the history of Jewish American. It is a month-long celebration designed to educate and inspire, offering opportunities to explore Jewish culture, history, and tradition. During this month, we have set up a weekly or bi-weekly display in all schools featuring Jewish symbols, culture information, community leaders, and traditional foods, giving students and parents the opportunity to engage with the material and experience a taste of Jewish life. The main goal for those displays was to bridge the gap in understanding of Judaism as a multicultural religion with a special focus on Jewish values, the diversity of Jewish population, locally and around the globe, and introducing rituals to all students, allowing them to connect to their personal perspective and experiences. We're going to close this month with a special community celebration, Shabbat Together, a time to connect, learn about Shabbat ritual, and celebrate the end of the school year. I want to invite everyone to join us on May 31st. We're also excited to learn more about the work of other affinity groups across Albany and finding ways to collaborate and to find the connections among us, as we are a diverse community that really value unity. We deeply appreciate the commitment to equity shown by Superintendent Ms. Stone, as well as the ongoing support we have received from AUSD team. Thank you for the time and the recognition.
Thank you. I think that deserves another round of applause. Okay. And thank you, Vice Mayor McQuaid, for facilitating that. Moving on to our next proclamation, National Emergency Medical Service Week and Emergency Medical Services for Children Day, which will be read by Councilmember Jordan and received by a handful of folks there.
Big handful.
Welcome. What a crew. In recognition of National Emergency Medical Services Week and Emergency Medical Services for Children Day, May 18th to 24th, 2025, and May 21st, 2025. Whereas the City of Albany, California recognizes the critical role of emergency medical services in safeguarding the health and well-being of our community, and whereas the dedicated paramedics of the Albany Fire Department provide exemplary emergency medical care and ambulance transportation to the citizens and visitors of Albany, and whereas the Albany Fire Department personnel are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury, and whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, emergency nurses, emergency physicians, and others, and whereas the members of the emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills, and whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week, now therefore be it proclaimed that the Albany City Council does hereby recognize the week of May 18th to May 24th, 2025 as National Emergency Medical Services Week with the theme We Care for Everyone, including the designation of May 21st, 2025 as Emergency Medical Services for Children Day, and encourages all Albany residents to recognize and honor the dedication of those who provide day-to-day life-saving services to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a quick word. Good evening. My name's Tim Smizer. I'm a paramedic captain with the Albany Fire Department. On behalf of Chief Boydo and the Albany Fire Department, thank you, Mayor Lopez and the Albany City Council for this meaningful proclamation honoring National Emergency Medical Services Week. The Albany Fire Department is honored to serve this community. We are committed to responding swiftly and skillfully to every call, whether it's a medical emergency, a traumatic injury, or providing critical care to our youngest residents. Thank you, Albany City Council and the citizens of Albany, for your continued support.
Thank you very much. And I do want to give a shout out to your team for being there on a personal note, for saving my wife and my son. It was your personnel that had responded and made sure that she was able to get the care that she needed immediately when she suffered a trimolar fracture. And 3 weeks later, gave birth to our son. But your work did not go unnoticed, and we appreciate it. And if you ever hear a little boy screaming and running by the fire station, yelling out "fire truck," that's him. But thank you again.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor. If I may.
Yeah. Oh, we have one
Yeah,
more comment.
I would offer another anecdote by way of thanks. As some of you know, you were recently in my place when my wife's wheelchair lift stalled out halfway up the stairs, and you managed to pick her up out of the chair and carry her up the stairs in a very inconvenient stairway. She greatly enjoyed the ride, and we thank you for your help. Yeah.
Thank you very much. A lot of times you showed up when I didn't even think I needed you. And because of your very dedicated 24-hour service, I'm in a much better place now as a survivor of domestic violence. And I was mad at you guys. I cursed you out. I drank his Kool-Aid thinking that you were at fault. So for that, I do apologize. So thank you. You were there, even though I didn't even want you there. So thank you.
All right. Take care. All right, and moving on to our final proclamation of the evening, Mental Health Awareness Month, which I'll read up here from the dais. Excuse me. In recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month, May 2025. Whereas during National Mental Health Awareness Month, we honor the courage of the tens of millions of Americans living with mental health conditions, and we celebrate the loved ones and mental health professionals who are there for them every day. And whereas engaging in prevention, early identification, and early intervention are as effective ways to reduce the burden of mental illness as they are to reduce the burden of other chronic conditions. And whereas mental health conditions are real and prevalent in our nation, 1 in 5 U.S. adults and 1 in 6 U.S. youth experience a mental health condition each year, and only half of them receive treatment. And whereas with effective treatment, those individuals with mental health and our other chronic health conditions can recover and lead full, productive lives. And whereas mental health helps to sustain an individual's relationship, productivity, and ability to adapt to change or face adversity. And whereas Mental Health Awareness Month is an opportunity to increase public understanding of the importance of mental health and to promote the identification and treatment of mental illness. And whereas we all have a role to play in ending the stigma around mental health issues, and it starts by showing compassion, so everyone feels free to ask for help. If you are facing a crisis, dial 988 to reach the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And whereas each business, school, government agency, healthcare provider, organization, and community members share the burden of mental health problems and has a responsibility to promote mental health wellness and support prevention efforts. And whereas the City of Albany would like to recognize and acknowledge the National Alliance of Mental Illness for their ongoing commitment to work to provide advocacy, education, support, and awareness so that all individuals and families affected by mental illness can build better lives. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed, the Albany City Council does hereby recognize May 2025 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the City of Albany and calls upon the community, businesses, nonprofit organizations, schools, and other groups in Albany to join in activities and take action to strengthen the mental health of our community. I took it upon myself to read that one personally because this is something I do want to take a moment to step back and highlight why mental health is important, why this month is important. Something I don't share often is that I had lost one of my best friends to suicide. And just a couple days ago, we just went through our 15th year without him. And it never gets easier. And I think when we challenge ourselves to be more open about what we're dealing with and what we're fighting through, what we've endured, that it makes it much easier for those who are still with us to understand what is available to them. Granted, I grew up in Richmond, and certainly my best friend and I didn't have access to the robust services and resources we have here in Albany. And I think that speaks a lot to conditions around societal inequities and privileges. But I think it's still worth highlighting that we have a lot to offer and to provide for those who are in need of help or maybe just are curious. I think it's important to be proactive and not wait for something to happen. And so I just want to acknowledge that in this month, I think this is an opportunity for all of us to be mindful of the actions, our everyday actions, how big of a difference a smile can do for someone, or just asking someone how their day was. After I had lost my best friend, and when his first birthday without him came around in May, I was at that time already in a deep, dark whirlwind of depression. I didn't know that I could have access to free therapy and things like that. And I'm sharing this and I'm being transparent because I think as your mayor, I have a certain sense of accountability and responsibility to acknowledge that we all need to show that we're human at the end of the day. I wish my friend could see where I'm at today. I wish he could see my beautiful son. I wish there was a lot more I could have done for him, but knowing that we challenge ourselves to be more vocal about this through actions such as Mental Health Awareness Month, I don't harbor guilt anymore. It's okay for me to miss someone. It's okay for any of us to miss someone. And it's okay for us to acknowledge that we're in moments of weakness. And when you acknowledge that you're in a moment of weakness, that's actually you showing the biggest signs of strength because you know yourself well. And so with that said, if anyone else here on the dais has anything else to share, to say, I'll gladly open the floor.
I grew up in an Asian family. Asian family, much like many Hispanic families, I think culturally, what happens in the family stays in the family. You don't talk about, you only talk about the good things. And also grew up Catholic, so combine those with parents who are Asian, who actually were born and raised in Lima, Peru, and you can end up growing up in a very insular family where everything stays inside the family. You know, I really wanted to say thank you to the EMS members who were here earlier because of the assistance they provided our family through medical emergencies, through the accident I got in where I totaled the car, Key Route and Solano Avenue. And through the mental health issues that we had as a family. And I say as a family because it affected all of us in different ways. And I thank the mayor for sharing his story. Many of you may know, or some of you may not know, that my youngest son suffered from mental health issues, and he was not the only one in the family, but he worked very hard from when he advocated for himself at 16 and a half through his 18th birthday. And I share this because it's important that we break down these walls where we don't talk about mental health, we don't talk about suicide. Last year I created a pin for us to wear because I was frankly jealous of the City of Oakland and the wonderful pin that they got to wear. And this year I switched pins. I found out about survivors of suicide and the ribbon that you can wear that addresses that, and a semicolon. And so I actually have two pins that I'll switch between. Ribbon that's supporting those who have also gone, are survivors of suicide, and the semicolon, which is expressing to those who know what it means that I'm open to talk about the stories that weren't complete, about the stories that my youngest son will never get to tell us or tell his friends who miss him dearly. But I wear it to be open, to let people know that there are those out there. You don't have to suffer from mental health issues on your own, and you definitely don't have to suffer with suicidal ideation or suicide survival on your own. So I do want to thank the EMS members for all the services they've helped. Also, the services that Albany Unified has, the incredible services. They both have mental health services and different services and counselors that they have at the school. And I would, again, emphasize, as the mayor said, if you are having mental health issues, whether it's depression or suicidal ideation, know that there are those out there who will listen to you, who will sit by you, and that you can share what you want or not, but that there are those out there. Please reach out to 988 and know that there are people that love you.
Yeah, I'll offer that my brother committed suicide in 2003. That's pretty intense that a majority of this council has had direct experience. To Councilmember Mickey's comments about family dynamic, I grew up in a, middle class, upper middle class family with Southern roots. Was in Los Angeles, and appearance was very important, status, wealth. By his own final notes, he killed himself in part because he had not achieved success that as he judged by the metric of our family. And so it was astounding to learn that though money is not the measure of a person by any means, and in the family I grew up in, it was to a large degree. And so he killed himself with $150,000 in the bank, and he didn't judge that sufficient to continue his life. So yes, please reach out for help. Anyone you know who is feeling in that place, please have them reach out for help.
I just want to thank you all for sharing. I can't imagine how hard it must be, and especially being the men on the council. I really appreciate that you're willing and able to be so open with the community. And I'm really grateful. Thank you.
I echo that as well. I was peer counselor in school growing up, and we were fortunate in Albany to have peer counselors in the middle school, and quite a few students, sought that help. And so I was very grateful that we had that program to us, and I'm grateful for the programs that we have out there. And I just wish everybody well. And yes, please reach out when you need someone, because sometimes it's just about the best thing that you could possibly do is just to talk. So, yeah, thank you all for sharing.
Again, thank you everyone on the dais, and I know that maybe might have been a bit emotional for everyone tapping in this evening, especially those in person, maybe hearing for the first time. But I think it is very fitting being it Mental Health Awareness Month, AAPI Heritage Month, and also just happened to be the birthday month of my best friend who I'd lost. But I hope this also communicates to folks that, in our moment of vulnerability, that you see that we are just as human as everyone else, and that this idea of being perfect or being successful or living up to certain societal, social constructs in society, unfortunately, it does get people, especially young people. And so now, I think now more than ever, especially with the things we're dealing with in our country, it is very important to spread awareness about mental health resources and services and programs. And I applaud the school in our district for being there for our young people when they need it most right now. Again, I hope, this moment of vulnerability shows you that we're not as perfect as you think we are, that, there's a lot that I think we all share a lot of commonality in the sense of life can be challenging, it can be difficult, and we should never be scared or reluctant to ask for help. That said, I know that was a bit of a heavy one, but that's why I wanted to save it for last, because I didn't want us crying through the other proclamations that were, rightfully deserved their own space. And we'll move on to city manager report. I know that's a hard one to follow up on. You got this.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. I echo the sentiments shared. Deep respect for all of you. Want to call attention and a reminder to a postcard you've received, hopefully you found in your mailboxes citywide here, for a citywide planning expo that is scheduled for tomorrow at our community center from 5:30 to 7:30. This is on 3 important planning processes currently underway citywide. One is our active transportation plan, which outlines opportunities to improve the city's future bicycle and pedestrian networks. The second is our street tree management plan, which identifies ways to enhance our street tree program citywide through planting, pruning, and additional program management. And also the third is our watershed management plan, which aims to study stormwater-related flow issues throughout the city and how to facilitate better infrastructure to work through upcoming challenges due to climate change and other environmental impacts of our watershed management. So please join us for that expo. A quick plug that we will have a raffle drawing for a free dinner with Albany table as part of the event, so hopefully that encourages additional participation. A early announcement for an event that seems to always fill up, so please schedule in advance. This is the Household Hazardous Waste one-day event in Albany on June 15th. It will again be held at Golden Gate Field, so appreciation to the current folks on Golden Gate Fields for continuing to facilitate this event, given the large area and facility that helps with the transportation through of hazardous waste here. You can sign up by visiting stopwaste.org and secure your spot for this event. It is free, but please be sure to register early. We've had a few events coming through the city. Appreciation to those that were able to attend. I know May is a very busy time for people. On May 10th, we had a movie in the park, which was Mamma Mia, a great night under the stars with the movie and great turnout by our community. So thank you for those that attended, and also to our Recreation and Community Services staff, as always, for their never-ending energy in facilitating these community events so perfectly. Also, last Thursday, we hosted a parcel tax exemption and renter rebate application assistance workshop at the Senior Center. We helped 42 people, households, with information about the tax exemption and renter rebate program at that event through one-on-one assistance in completing the application. So thrilled to have that level of turnout. And the good news is it's that wasn't the end. It's not too late to apply. These are year-round, so please check our website for more information, albanyca.gov/exemptions. And also you can pick up an application, physical application at our community center or senior center. Another event from this past weekend, our staff has been busy, was the compost giveaway last Saturday. 1,500 bags of compost were given away, and really special shout out to our Public Works Department maintenance crew that showed up at dawn on Saturday to unload the truck, and then were cheerful throughout the day as they lifted heavy loads into cars, bikes, and wheelbarrows of compost. So it's really a great event that we have every year. And finally, a reminder that we have the foyer art gallery on view now at the community center in the lobby area. It's a show presented by artist Karen Butwinick titled Dawn or Demise. So please check that out. It will be on view through July 17th. That completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Do we have any questions from council? Any questions from the public? All right, thank you again. We are now going to move on to Good of the City, public comment. This is for items not on the agenda.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Stephen Alpert. For more than 1 year, I and over a dozen individuals have requested the council justify why Albany falls under the minimum state mandate of notifying those within 300 feet of new construction, regardless of project size, when in fact, for years, other California cities have used wider and varied notification to distinguish between small and large-scale projects. Tonight, I will not review how 3 city officials, notably Councilman Jordan, outright lied and for months engaged in obfuscation as why Albany could not expand notification beyond the minimum state mandate, but instead focus on the continued reluctance of this council to address 300 feet notice. The practice of only alerting those within 300 feet clearly limits public discourse, allowing the Planning and Zoning Commission to propose, and the council then push through new projects, no matter how inappropriate, with minimal awareness and input from the public. Such was the case for the oversized 5-story modern box proposed for 1600 Solano Avenue. Only 73 properties were alerted by postcards mailed 10 days before the first Planning and Zoning hearing. By approving the plans for this project as submitted, the council violated every aspect of Albany's Planning and Zoning mission statement, which reads, "The purpose of design and review is to ensure that designs of projects are visually and functionally appropriate to their site and harmonious with their surroundings." Clearly, the plans for 1600 Solano are not visually and functionally appropriate or harmonious with the adjacent Craftsman-era buildings. Density bonus law was cited as the reason the city had to greenlight that 5-story building with no setback and no parking. But density bonus does not override enforcement of local building ordinances. At the very least, the Planning and Zoning Commission and the council should have insisted that the building incorporate Craftsman features to be compatible with the neighborhood. 300 feet notice is reasonable for minor additions to private homes, but inappropriate for large multi-story projects. Other California municipalities use 1,000 feet notice for such projects. To date, the city's only response regarding 300 notice has been the city attorney's assertion that Albany is in full compliance with the minimum state mandate. No council member has offered valid reasons as to why Albany should continue to adhere to 300 feet notice for large multi-story projects. If the council generally believes that alerting only those within 300 feet is appropriate for large multi-story projects which impact all of Albany, then defend this practice. Submit 300 feet notification as a meeting agenda item to allow for extended, in-depth public discussion. For reasons unknown, this council has refused to do so. Albany deserves better. My wife will continue.
Thank you for your comment.
Good evening. I am Dr. Celeste Sparks. As stated, for more than 1 year, this council has declined to submit 300-foot notification as a formal agenda item. Why is the council so reluctant to address this issue? Whose interests are being served by refusing to discuss this issue? Certainly not those of your constituents. 43 individuals voiced legitimate concerns about 1600 Solano during the single council meeting devoted to the project. And then Vice Mayor Tiedemann commented on the intensity of the feelings in the forwarded emails. Councilman McQuaid correctly called the project disappointing and requested continuance, as did several Albany residents. However, presiding Mayor Jordan moved for immediate approval. Of note, current council members Lopez, Mickey, and Hanson Romero were not in the council in 2022. More than a dozen individuals have requested wider notification for large-scale projects. Perplexed by the council's unjustified adherence to minimal public notice for such projects. Again, why has the council steadfastly refused to address the issue of 300-foot notification? Your constituents deserve an open public debate on whether Albany should expand notification for large multi-story projects beyond 300 foot. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, thank you. This is Sarah Zuba. I'm on the Transportation Commission, but I'm speaking for myself today. I just had a couple things. The first one is a technical issue I wanted to alert you all of, is that right now the settings for joining the webinar through Zoom is that you have to register to attend the meeting before the meeting starts. And so this makes it impossible for people who, if you're busy and you don't register in advance, you're not able to register after the meeting has started to be able to participate. So I would just like to request that the settings for these webinars is adjusted so that it is not required for you to register before the meeting starts, and that you are able to register and then join after the meeting start. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about is related to an item on last week's agenda, or your last meeting's agenda, 10-1, where you were talking about the bike access on Solano. And I'm not going to harbor about my personal opinions on that project, but one thing that I will send an email eventually with my 2 cents. But what I wanted to talk about today is just, when I was listening to the conversation that was happening between the council members, I've had personal conversations with a number of you, and I know that we have a shared vision for a safe and a thriving Albany. But when I heard the discussion that was happening, I felt like any potential challenge or obstacle that could come with putting bike lanes on Solano, instead of being met with a mentality of like innovation and being change makers and trying to work through some of those potential obstacles, it felt like a lot of them were, it was almost like we were trying to find excuses to not move forward with this project. That was really disappointing to me, because I look at our town and I see, we're a thriving town, and I want my kids to be able to ride their bikes and be able to have independence. So often we're complaining about kids just being inside and on their laptops or on their devices. And, when I'm talking with parents, I have 3 young kids and I work full time. And so when I'm talking with parents, so often they're not letting their kids ride to school, or they're not letting their kids go out on their own because they don't feel safe.
Thank you for your comment.
So I have to stop. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. This is Lucinda Young. I'm an Albany resident and an Albany Climate Action Coalition member. I wanted to make First of all, 2 announcements on behalf of the coalition. There is the 2025 East Bay Green Home Tour is coming up on June 7th. That's hosted by the City of Berkeley and the nonprofit Actera. It's a free event, and there's going to be at least 1 Albany home on the tour, which is fully electrified, as well as several homes in nearby Berkeley and El Cerrito. For this event, neighbors open their homes to the community to share how they've transitioned away from gas to electrify their homes and also make sustainable upgrades. I also wanted to mention an event coming up on May 25th that Albany Climate Action Coalition and the Albany Library are hosting as part of the Sunday Sustainability Series. And it will be a free presentation which will explore the importance of integrating native plants into the urban forest, including street trees, park trees, city landscapes. There will be an arborist, Elizabeth Lanahan will speak, as well as Margot Cunningham, who's the city's natural areas coordinator, as well as an Albany Climate Action Coalition member who will speak about the Free Street program. And I also wanted to mention, I just read an excellent article in the Yale Climate Newsletter, which was entitled, "Can States and Cities Lead on Climate Under Trump?" And it highlighted a recent study from the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability that concluded that state and local governments could reduce emissions so dramatically that the nation could still hit key climate targets, even with federal action effectively stopped for the next several years. It references the Network Climate Mayors, which Albany joined last year. So I think it's just a reminder to us how important the work that cities are doing on climate. And I also just wanted to express concern, as the previous speaker did, about the council's discussion at the last meeting on the issue of whether bike lanes on Solano should be explored. I was really happy that council passed alternative 1, but I was surprised and also disappointed that it was a 3-2 vote and that it was not unanimous. I understood very well the objections to alternative 2, which would have required a reduction in car parking, but I didn't hear any reasonable arguments against alternative 1. I just want to remind council that there was a unanimous passage of the climate emergency declaration last year, which said that council will set policy and assign resources through the lens of climate action. And I think that
Thank you for your comment.
was not adequately considered. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, members of the public, for your comment. Oh, we have one more.
I apologize. May I have a picture of everybody before we go? I have to bounce pretty soon to take care of my 91-year-old dad, so I would really appreciate a picture with everybody with the proclamation, please.
Of course, just as long as you get my good side.
You don't have a bad side, Mayor. Trust me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, team, for never passing up on a good photo op. Moving on to item number 7, consent calendar.
Apologies. Staff, can you respond at all to the technical issues that were described for Zoom? Is that correct, that you have to register ahead of time?
We're actively looking into it. Certain users are able to do it without registering, so we'll need to sort out what the particular situation was, but we'll definitely rectify any issues.
Thank you.
Thank you for getting clarification on that. Moving on to item number 7, consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered routine and can be enacted by one motion. unless any item pulled by members on the council or members of the public. Do any members on council wish to pull an item? Not seeing any. Do any members of the public wish to pull an item? All right.
Move consent.
Second.
Thank you. City Clerk.
Vice Mayor McQuay,
Yes.
Mayor Lopez,
Yep.
Councilmember Hanson Romero,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember Mackey,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
All right.
Can I make a request? Is it possible now to open the doors and open the outside doors? It's really warm in here. Thank you.
Good call, Vice Mayor. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 8, our presentations. We have 8-1, proposed biennial budget for fiscal year 25-26 and 26-27. And we'll pass it off to city staff.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Raina Schwartz, your finance director, and I'm delighted to be here this evening to formally present our proposed fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27 budgets. This is the biennial process that the council goes through to review the budget and ultimately take action on it. This evening, I'll go over some of the highlights of what is in the budget packet, and this is in preparation for any final adjustments, corrections we need to make for adoption through a public hearing scheduled for June 2nd. So with that, I will ask the clerk to move on to the next slide. This is just a bit of a reminder of what your 2-year budget process looks like. We actually began this process back in December with the departments looking at their budgets, everybody evaluating current situation, et cetera. And then the council typically in February, March does 2 things. One, you get a mid-year assessment of the current year's budget, as well as a look at a strategic planning session to adopt a 2-year strategic plan, which then guides budget development. In May, here we are. We had our committee meeting last week. Gosh, the weeks are long, but fast. May 12th, we had our budget committee workshop, and this evening, presentation of the budget. June will be adoption. Then we start our new fiscal year July 1st. And we repeat some of the same cycle for the second year. It's a little bit less intense as we head toward the budget, thankfully, from myself and my staff's perspective. We appreciate that. And then any adjustments are brought, we adopt the budget again for the second year of the cycle, and we start over. There's never any rest for the weary in the budget process, so it's an ongoing adventure. So next slide, please. A little bit of context for our budget this year. A couple of things that are moving and really provide the foundation for what we'll be talking about this evening. There's a bit of economic uncertainty in the world, both domestically and globally. We can't do much about any of, we can't do anything about any of that. But we do pay close attention so that we are ready to respond as needed for areas where we need to make changes or address situations that arise. A second major piece for us is the closure of Golden Gate Fields almost a year ago. That has had some impact on our revenues. It's not enormous in the general fund, but it is noticeable, and we will continue to see what happens potentially with that property. Pension liabilities are always a topic when we're talking about budget. The city participates in the CalPERS statewide public pension plan, and there are ongoing both regular costs and essentially liability or pension debt costs that we have to pay according to CalPERS, and so we do pay attention to that over time because it's a significant component of our budget. And then the final piece that I would add is that the Bay Area and Albany have faced a strong labor market, which means that we compete to bring the best talent and to keep the best talent, and that does put pressure on labor costs. This council has been extremely supportive of ensuring that Albany employees are fairly compensated and that we remain competitive in the market, but that doesn't result in lower labor costs. That results in higher labor costs. So we face that as well. This is a not very pretty picture of our pension liability costs. Suffice it to say that blue line is the amount that we must pay each year as a minimum toward our pension liability. And so what you see is that we'll continue to go up for a while, and then it will start to come back down. What this doesn't show is that it is very dependent as well on market returns. And so if there are years in which there are poor market returns for CalPERS, it means that ultimately our pension liabilities go up. So again, we don't have any control over the market, but we do pay close attention to this so we can ensure as best we can that we're prepared for what those cost implications are going to be down the line. Next slide, please. So, City Council strategic goals. These should seem tremendously familiar to all of you and lay kind of the groundwork for those high priority items. Similar to what you discuss when you have your strategic planning sessions, these are the kind of top line or headline items. The vast majority of the city's work happens in a sort of iceberg model below the surface, right? Day-to-day operations. But these strategic plan goals are still a strong component for departments as they work through their day-to-day obligations and look toward their own departmental goals over the course of the year. So moving on to the next slide, way too much information to probably take, and it's probably a terrible slide for that purpose, but it's also in your packet, and I'll talk as we go forward about some of the components of it. But what's most important about this slide is that for the first time in several years, the column labeled proposed budget, in this case, proposed 25-26 budget, has a 0 at the bottom. That is the happiest 0 you are ever going to see. That budget is balanced. Thank you, Madam Clerk. If the cursor was moving, it was highlighting my 0. I love that. It is through the hard work of all of the departments. I feel like it should have flashing lights or something. Like I need to do dancing bears or something for this thing. Anyway. Not a big PowerPoint person, but the 0 is really important, and it does reflect a lot of hard work by our departments to ensure that we can really hold costs to within our resources in a difficult environment. So that's really the most, I think, striking thing about that particular table. Kind of moving on to look at some of the individual components. On the revenue side, one of the things that we saw coming out of COVID was very conservative revenue budgeting, and then our revenues did better than we anticipated. And so what we've had for the last several years is we've achieved revenues above budget. For the proposed 25-26 budget, we've right-sized those revenues or aligned them more with our experience. What that means is we should be closer in terms of budget versus actual. And when you look at the FY25 budget versus the FY26 budget, there's quite a big increase in the revenue number. That doesn't mean our revenues are going to grow by 14% or whatever that percentage is. It's really a reflection of taking those revenue budgets and putting them where we have seen our revenues to begin with. At the same time, sales tax revenues have been soft and continue to be soft. That is not only true for Albany, but it is true across the Bay Area and to some degree across the state. And so we don't expect that to be a particularly strongly growing or at all growing revenue source. So we'll continue to watch that closely. It will depend a little bit on the overall economy and whether underlying economic growth continues or whether we suffer a bit more of a contraction. Property tax revenues, the biggest source for Albany, pretty stable source, which is great. It's growing at a pretty good rate for us. We anticipate property tax growth going into FY26 at about 3.7%. The assessor has told us that it is their prediction that we will have slower growth in the future. So again, we'll watch that. To the extent that property tax keeps growing at a decent pace, that will help tremendously in future year budgets. There are a few additional transfers from special revenue sources. So special revenues are those that come typically for a specific purpose. So some of our parcel taxes are special revenues. Gas taxes that come from the state are special revenues. And where appropriate, we do transfer money from those special sources that come into their own funds into the general fund to support general fund operations. So sewer fund, in addition to funding operations within the actual sewer operation, we do have costs to manage that fund as part of our overall fund portfolio. And so we will be making for FY25 a transfer in, and that is continued in 26 and 27. There are some additional transfers in from others, public works related special revenues. Those typically support programs and projects on the operating side that are associated with the purposes for which those funds are levied, but also many of those funds are also used for capital purposes, and we typically only see the operating side in the budget, but you did hear a CIP presentation, and so you'll continue to see more from those revenue sources. And then the last piece is for the next 2 years anyway, we are planning to use state comps funding, as it's referred to, for an administrative sergeant position. That is an existing position, but it has been also overseeing the records and dispatch functions. And there is a proposal, which we'll talk about on the expenditure side, to swap how that's funded and to bring in some additional civilian subject matter expertise to oversee those functions. So that's another transfer in. Looking at what the picture looks like of revenues, pretty tame, pretty relatively flat with a little bit of growth as we go into the out years. You can see that FY23 and FY24, you saw a steeper growth coming out of COVID, but we have flattened out substantially more over the last year or so. So growing, but not growing quite as quickly. Looking at the expenditure side, there are a few things to note, kind of high-level items. I'm going to go back momentarily. You don't have to switch back to the slide because it's not going to show on the slide. But just a note, and it will come up in your next item. In the base budget, there is $226,000 estimated / budgeted for sugar-sweetened beverage tax revenues. Those are that has been it's been a declining source actually for us. And the only amounts that are in the budget are those revenues that have been anticipated to come in. And so when you start talking about SSB programs, there's $226,000 in the budget, and that is pretty much it for that source. So now looking at the expenditure side, salary and benefits make up the biggest chunk of our budget. If we just focused initially on cost of living adjustments, equity adjustments, and regular step increases, et cetera, plus all of our other changes in costs related to salaries and benefits, that cost increase would be about $1.8 million between FY25 and FY26. That has been brought down to just under $1 million in the proposed budget through a couple of factors, two in particular. The first is there are 3 positions that are currently vacant in the budget that are proposed to be held vacant or unfunded over the course of the budget, and that does provide some significant savings. And secondarily, every year, departments face turnover. It's very common. And what that has meant is in many years we have seen budgetary savings that are really a result of that turnover or salary savings. But we know this is going to happen every year. It happens regular as clockwork. And so in this budget, and this is common in many cities, we have pulled those savings essentially into the budget side. And we have said we anticipate that we will have turnover and that that turnover will result in lower costs for salary and benefits as a result of the period of time where positions remain vacant. And so we have adjusted our budget to account for that up front. That means they won't come as a happy gift at the end of the year, but they are, in fact, still a significant component in balancing our budget and allowing us to move forward with a proposed balanced budget. A couple of other things, as I mentioned, we do have a few revenue sources that are in support of our general fund or that reduce the burden on the general fund, so we are using those. That helps manage our general fund costs. The one significant change from a position and expenditure standpoint, there is a vacant management analyst position that was funding or was supporting the risk management function. It's proposed to move that to the police department to be a civilian oversight, records and communications supervisor. The risk management functions that position had assigned to it have been distributed across staff already, so those functions won't see any change in how they're performed currently, but it will provide a significant benefit to the police department to have that supervisory position. And then just a final note that the city's annual payment for the pension unfunded liability is increasing by about $300,000, and that is an 8.7% increase in that cost alone, but that just adds to overall pressure on the general fund. One other thing to note is that the city is recommending this year in the budget that for insurance costs, we pay premiums just like you pay a premium for your own insurance costs. And you can choose, when you go to do your car insurance, they tell you, well, what do you want your deductible to be? Similar thing occurs for our liability, workers' comp, et cetera. Self-insured retention is the more formal term for it. It's not a deductible, but it's just like a deductible. You, the city, have to pay it first before any insurance kicks in. Looking at our claim costs over the last 5 to 10 years, we have not had a lot of significant claims, which is very good. And the insurance premiums, we have kept the increase in those down for the coming 2 years by increasing that self-insured retention or increasing that deductible. So that's just another way that we're balancing out our current costs as we look ahead to what we think is going to happen. The next slide is just another picture of expenses. You can see that we have held expenses very flat between 25 and 26. That's intentional. But even with those changes, salary savings, the 3 unfunded positions, et cetera, there are costs that will continue to go back up, and we see that tip back up toward FY27. Next slide, where are we? General fund expenses by category. It's just another way to look at those expenditures. Salaries and benefits, the vast majority of the budget, so that's just a picture. It hovers just over 70% and is pretty consistent over time. The next slide talks a little bit about our Emergency Medical Services Fund. This has a couple of major revenue streams that come into it. One is the Parcel Tax Measure K that was implemented several years ago that replaced the two older parcel taxes. That is performing as we anticipated and is providing a healthy revenue into that fund. The other major source of revenue is ambulance billing, and again, that's a heavily regulated arena, but we are receiving a significant amount of revenue into our EMS fund from that source. The third piece is a relatively small $300,000 transfer in from our pension tax override. So the city has long, 1982, had a essentially another special tax. This one is specifically designated for police and fire pension costs. And so a portion of that is transferred into the EMS fund to cover the relevant piece of the EMS employees' pension costs. It doesn't fully cover those costs by any means, but it does provide an additional contribution for that. The expenses, labor, medical supplies, and some services costs. So we have the majority of the fire department's calls are medical calls, and now that the EMS fund is, we know kind of where it's going to land, we have been able to reallocate some of the labor costs for EMS that were carried by the general fund directly into that EMS fund. And so when you look at the general fund for the fire department as proposed for FY26 and FY27, it looks like we're, slashing a bunch of money. That's not true. It's a reallocation between funding sources as opposed to just a direct reduction in actual total budgeted expenditures. Next up, we have our sewer operating fund. This is another one where it looks like, good grief, we're taking in so much money. Why are we taking in so much money when the operation is only half of the revenue? Capital projects. So last week, or the prior council meeting, you heard a presentation on your capital improvement program, and one of the projects you heard about was the Brighton Sewer Project. That's a very expensive project, so we will be using fund balance, essentially, from our sewer fund that we have been collecting to make sure that we have adequate reserves, adequate resources to pay for those required projects. Next, we're up to departments. So a couple things. There's a lot more information in the budget document than on this slide, despite the fact that the slide looks like it has a lot of information. The one thing I'll notice on this slide is for the city council budget, that does include the City Council discretionary fund that has been funded this year at $35,000. So that is in the overall budget for the City Council. So just as a heads up on that topic. And then on the next slide, again, you can just see the rest of the departments as well as the EMS fund and the sewer operational fund. So that makes up the bulk of your operating budget in terms of those major resources. Next slide. Staffing. So a couple things about staffing. No net increase in funded positions. Total of 118.3. That 0.3 is really a 0.8 position and a 0.5 position. It seems like you can't cut people in half, but sometimes people don't work full time. That's how you get that. We don't bring in half of you gets to come to work to one day, half of you gets to come to work the other day. I mentioned the vacant management analyst position moving from risk management to the police department, and that 3 positions that are currently vacant will be held unfunded. There are 8 positions that are currently vacant total, including the 3 that are proposed to be unfunded. The reason that I mention this in part this year is that there was legislation passed, AB 2561, that requires the city to council to hear a presentation, to hear about staffing and vacancies. We do not have any of our recognized employee organizations that have vacancies in excess of 20% of the authorized positions, which is great. It means that the work that we've done on recruitment and retention is working, and we're continuing to spend more effort trying to make sure that we understand what's driving recruitment and retention in this very tight labor market. But there isn't, we aren't required to do a much more in-depth sort of forensic analysis of what's happened because we are not in excess of 20% in any of our bargaining units, and that's a real positive. So there are recruitments underway for most of the positions that are vacant that will not be held vacant over or unfunded over the years of the budget. So as much as possible, despite the fact that there's regular turnover, I think we're doing relatively well with respect to the staffing pieces. And a question came up, there's a statistic in the budget that we've hired approximately 80 people in the last 2 years. That's really true, but that includes everything from turnover in full-time positions to part-time positions, our rec positions, our any of our intern positions. So we do have a pretty steady flow of recruitment and retention efforts. Okay, next up, just a few more slides. Pension override tax, I mentioned this briefly. This is a tax that's been in place for a long time that allows us to bring in some additional funds toward police and fire retirement costs. It was originally put in place in part to address an unfunded pension liability associated with the city's closed police and fire pension plan. That pension plan closed in 1971. And we have about a dozen retirees still receiving benefits under that plan. And we make a contribution every year to funding that, and ultimately that fund will either continue to pay those through the life of those retirees, or we will balance it with general fund to finish out that obligation that we have to those retirees. Each year, the council is required to set by resolution the rate. We're recommending the same rate that it's been pretty much every year since 1982, which is 0.0993%. Is a really hard number to remember, in my opinion, because it's, how do you deal with a, anyway, very small number, but brings in a good source of revenue for us. Moving on, there are just a couple of other things. Reserve funds. So these are smaller reserve funds that have been established by the council for various purposes over the years, some departmental primarily, and we've made a recommendation this year to combine a couple of funds that were similar in nature, so we will combine those. And the bottom line is there is far more unmet need across all of these funds than there are funds. That will continue to be the case. I would be surprised if any city ever found themselves in a situation where they said, we just have so much money, we've met all our needs. That would be great. It's probably not going to happen, and there will need to be continued conversations about prioritization as well as funding strategies. But that's just a kind of a reminder of those pieces that are pending for us in the future. Next slide. So 10-year forecast. This first time the council saw an out-year forecast was 2 years ago in the last biennial cycle. This year we've taken that a little bit farther, tried to give it a little bit more of an economic bent by looking at some of these very specific components to it. And if we go to the graph, what you can see is that little teeny tiny blue bar. That's the one that would have the dancing bears, if it could have dancing bears, balanced budget. what you see is that by FY 26-27, almost immediately, we are back in a situation where, absent any other action, there would be potentially a deficit. And what that really indicates for us is there's a bit of a structural imbalance still where our expenses are growing more quickly than our revenues, and that there is something that we will need to address, and we will be continuing to have those conversations going forward. The shape of that curve is primarily driven by the shape in the other direction of the unfunded pension liability costs. And so once we get to the point where the budgets are adopted for 26 and 27, we will continue to then work on what are our longer-term strategies for dealing with the pension liabilities as well as overall revenues and expenditures so that we can bring those in balance over the long term and not just for the 1 year as we have done for FY26. On the last slide, and just in summary, we're balanced. We have a small deficit anticipated at this point for FY27. That has been left in the budget because we will know a whole lot more in another 9 to 10 months the next time we are talking about an upcoming fiscal year budget. And we will be working on recommendations to bring forward to balance that budget as well. But trying to, as they say, squeeze blood from a turnip between now and 9 months from now isn't necessarily the most valuable use of our time at this point and isn't recommended, but we are well aware that that is something that if we weren't able to bring that into balance, it would require a transfer from the reserves. So we are working toward making sure that we can bring FY27 into balance to the best extent possible. And with that, I want to thank the city manager, thank all the departments, thank everybody for their work. This has been a tremendous effort to get to this point this year, and I would be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do we have any questions from members on council?
This is probably a little bit weedy, but, and thank you for all the questions you answered earlier today for me. But can you remind me what happens with the pension fund when there's no longer people being paid from that fund, and assuming there's some revenue left? Where does that revenue go?
That is an excellent question. That question has been asked a number of times over the last, 10, 15 years. And the answer is it probably still needs more evaluation. I will not ask Mala to answer that question right now, but it is something that once there are no more retirees, there isn't anyone for whom that fund was established. And so we would look to see whether we would be able to use any remaining funds, should there be any, for other police and fire retirement costs. But honestly, that's a bridge we have to legally figure out how to walk over at that point.
Okay, thank you.
I said it a week ago, I'll say it again. Thank you very much to yourself and the rest of the city staff for balancing the budget and for resolving some of the quirks. This is a second large one that you've resolved in terms of previous iterations of the finance department not taking into account staff turnover. And therefore, I had to try to make my own adjustment as to what the expenses were actually going to be for that. So I'm very grateful not to have to do that anymore and to be able to take the numbers as they're presented. The prior foible that was corrected under your leadership was the transfers in, so that they didn't all come at the end of the year. So I thank you for those questions. What property tax increase percentage was used for the out year, FY27, if you happen to know? I don't expect you to have all these at the top of your head. It just occurred to me while you were giving the presentation.
I believe it was 3%. I can double check that,
Sure.
but that was the number the assessor provided to us.
Yeah, I was just curious how much down from the current recent rate of increases is. Does Measure K cover the entirety of the EMS ALS cost that is not reimbursed by insurance? Or is there some more that isn't covered? It was designed to cover it all, but I don't know if in fact it is covering it all. I mean, it must be hard to divide out.
That's the challenge. I mean, if you, one of the things we did this year, for example, is we looked at all the staffing. We said, okay, what percentage of their time is EMS versus fire, right? So we split that EMS to fire. Honestly, there's probably some left in the general fund that is either a mix or could be more clearly associated with EMS that's not yet funded from the EMS fund. But we are much closer to having the EMS program fully funded through Measure K and the ambulance revenues.
Okay, it'll become clear why I asked that when we go to deliberation. All but one of the reserve fund balance tables have 0 in the expenditures appropriations entry. And one example is on PDF page 112 for the police equipment reserve fund. And so there's for each of the reserve funds, there's kind of a balance table at the bottom, which has the audited ending balance from the start of this biennial period we're in, and then the projected or estimated ending balance, and then contributions and expenditures in between. It lists 0, and all of them list 0 expenditure appropriation except for one. And yet in that particular reserve fund, like some of the others, in the pros section at the lead, it does list some expenditures that were made. So I'm kind of, seems disjoint to me, but there's probably some accounting rule I don't know about that is the reason for the 0 in the bottom one.
There are 2 reasons for the disconnect that you're potentially seeing between the text and the table. One is that there were some expenditures in FY 23-24, so before FY 25, that show up in the bullet points of funds spent but aren't in this fiscal year. They were in last fiscal year, so they show up as having been spent, but the table only reflects things from FY 25.
Okay.
So there's some old stuff in there. And then there were 3 expenses across 2 of the funds that were just not picked up in that table. And there have been actuals spent out of the fire reserve for the signal preemption, some signal preemption hardware and software, as well as some vehicle upfitting, and there's a small amount in the community recreation reserve for Wi-Fi at the community center. So there were a couple places where the numbers didn't get pulled from the text into the tables, but a couple of the numbers were because they were FY 24.
And so those ones that were from this fiscal year, that'll be an amendment. When you say they didn't get pulled in, I'm hearing, but maybe inaccurately, those will get pulled into the table or the official budget when it comes to us. Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, those are my questions. Thanks. Thank you, Mayor.
I just had a quick question around the vacant roles and positions being moved. I know we discussed earlier, but maybe just for the sake of transparency with the public, 'cause, I would imagine some folks may be curious about a position being shifted over to the police department. I was wondering if you could elaborate on how that may be fiscally or functionally advantageous for that role to be moved into the record-keeping role.
So I can share the perspective that was shared to me from the police chief, and that is that right now the administrative sergeant performs both sort of law enforcement administration management type activities as well as overseeing records and communications. That kind of split role means that we're using someone with law enforcement expertise to do work that does not require that expertise, but it's also missing the sort of, best practices for records management and dispatch management, et cetera, that a civilian position could provide. And so what it does is it gives both better management of the records and dispatch functions, as well as providing better support for the police department on the law enforcement side. So it really pulls those apart in a way that the chief felt, given the sort of size and complexity of the department as it stands now, is really beneficial to the police department today.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions from the dais? Not seeing any further questions, we'll move it on to public comments for this item. Do we have any members of the public that would wish to speak on this item?
I have a question regarding to the Golden Field closure. What's the deficit it creates on the budget, and any potential upcoming benefit from future operation that may supplement the deficit? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And do we have any online? Okay. Before we bring it back to council, any response to regarding Golden Gate closure?
The general fund impact from the closure primarily related to sales tax revenue and the old race wagering tax that we had is, I want to say it's about $300,000. We are already experiencing that this fiscal year, so it's not new for 26. It's already in place. There is also a significant potential for further impacts on special parcel tax revenues for specific purposes, depending on what happens with that property in the future. As for what will happen in the future and that impact, I think that's something we're all waiting to see.
So, sorry, just elaborate. The potential real estate tax loss would be approximately, do we have a number?
The special revenue total coming to the city, so that's sewer, Measure K, et cetera, is $700,000 or $800,000 a year, on top of the $200,000 to $300,000 a year that the general fund has already. And I can see that the city manager is looking up the Golden Gate Fields transition webpage, which will do a better job of answering these questions than I can probably do off the top of my head.
It's $800,000 in special revenues, which is the parcel taxes. Those aren't necessarily falling directly into our general fund, but clearly they facilitate a number of services and programs and projects. As it currently stands, we are continuing to receive those until there is a transition with the property, which we do not have any information on at this time in terms of any concrete movement.
Thank you. Did you have something else further to add, Councilmember Jordan?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if the city manager is willing to say to the second part of the commenter's question. Thank you for asking the questions. How long have you been following the machinations of what might happen with this property? And there's no definite prospect as far as I know.
Sure. Briefly, it is still under discussion in terms of the anticipated potential transition of the property and whether that be something transferable within open space. We're still yet to understand the next steps from the parties involved, and as such, we would need that information before we have more to relay publicly.
It's been, I lose track of time. Has it been a year and a half or
since the closure.
2 years, or
Yeah,
I don't
since
remember.
the closure, really, yeah.
Is that a year and a half now? I can't quite recall.
Let's see, I have it here. Boy, time flies. July 16th, 2023 is when the closure was announced, so shortly thereafter.
Yeah, it's almost 2 years, and we still don't know what's going to happen.
Right, which tells you the length of time that this is likely to involve.
I hearken to, I moved to Albany in 1994, and the racetrack was going to close in 5 years for the entire 30-year period, so I don't know if this is going to be exactly the same, but I kind of keep that in mind.
Thank you again, city staff, for answering questions. And I bring it back here to the dais for discussion. I know you all are just so thrilled to talk about our budget right now.
I am. I love numbers. So I mentioned in the council committee meeting, and I'll just say it here for the benefit of the council members who aren't on that committee, and I understand, there hasn't been time to do this, but it would be useful on the unfunded pension liability graph to have the units on the vertical axes, because I think one series is in current dollars, which is the dollars of that year, out year, and the other one is in, is it base year dollars? I can't remember.
All the dollars are the same.
Okay, so they're all base year. Okay. And then also because the unfunded pension liability is, at least last we have it, it's about $41 million, if I recall correctly. But that number gets put out there as like, we're not addressing it. But the budget is addressing a large part of it. So I think it'd be useful to notionally divide that between, if we just kept contributions at the rate we're making now, what portion of that 41 million would be addressed? Because I think that's helpful to see mentally, okay, this is the portion that we're not addressing and we need to figure out how to address. The reason I brought up the EMS ALS funding and whether Measure K completely covered it is because that is one of the measures, as I understand it, although analysis is still going on, that needs to be taken back to the ballot so that it can be levied against unsecured property. This is the private corporations, for-profit corporations that are leasing property from UC. In structuring that measure, that was on the council committee, ad hoc committee that put together the structure, it's based on per square foot of land. And there's reasons for that, but I think there's an opportunity to be fair, or maybe you can go to per square foot of building, which also would make more sense with the unsecured properties, and there might be an opportunity to increase that revenue at that time, and so that could potentially help support the general fund. So just something to keep in mind going forward. I do have some other comments. I can keep going, or
Keep going.
keep going, keep rolling. Okay. I appreciate that there was so much about each department in the budget. Thanks for that information. I just want to recognize a few things and then make a few suggestions, department by department. Really grateful for the economic development division, the economic development that has occurred. That I know has been a long process, but it really seems like it's firing along and below the waterline now, so to speak, in the parlance we've been taught. So very much appreciate that. And then the risk management division working with the finance department to right-size our JPA insurance contributions. I would ask that the property tax modernization goal be changed from November of 26 as the target election for that to June of 26. Because my understanding, and please check and validate this, my understanding is if they pass in June of 26, they can be levied on the 26-27 property tax bill, which means we would get that revenue, and I estimate it's about $500,000 a year that we're not able to collect currently from the unsecured properties, including Belmont Village and other properties, which, part of the reason the council approved that in 2012 was because it was going to generate revenue, and it's not because of this glitch. Whereas if we have it on the November 26 ballot, then we're going to lose yet another year of that revenue. Human resources, I just want to note, 2,100 applications processed to leading to 88 hires facilitated by a new information system. That's pretty phenomenal. That's pretty amazing. Congratulations to the department. Finance, thank you for the clean audit. That was a epic long quest. Don't want to let that go by. That goes with the 0, I think. That's equally as celebratory. And for submitting the audits to the Government Finance Officers Association for award consideration. That's the first time I've heard Albany doing that, so I'm quite excited about that. And I look forward to the enhanced capital asset tracking system. Serve on the board of ACMAD, as the mayor did, and it was the first time I'd seen an agency that had every asset in a depreciation schedule, and they know like exactly, to the extent one can know what their financial needs are going to be for their capital assets and replacement and repair going forward. So I look forward to that. I'll be kind of frightened to see what it has to say, but nonetheless, information we should have. For the police department, I don't know that it was noted in their accomplishments, but I wanted to note that the department facilitated mental health response separate from police response, and I know that couldn't continue, but that was not due to the department. That was due to the contractor not being able to staff it, which is a industry-wide problem. I would imagine the department, there's a lot of cross-training, I would imagine, that occurred informally, and so that in the end left some upgrade for the department in terms of skills. So I think it would be useful to recognize that in the accomplishments. And appreciate the implementation of the automatic license plate recognition cameras. Fire, I think fire is too modest in their accomplishments. They didn't note that the 2 arson fires on Albany Hill that were successfully suppressed without any buildings being damaged, which I think is a phenomenal testament to that department as well as Public Works for the sensitive management of the vegetation on the hill, so that those fires were not as extreme as they would have been otherwise, and then obviously the response in the moment. And then another accomplishment is researching and ordering the ladder truck that is uniquely suited to Albany so that we can sharpen the corners of our intersections, which will make them safer for sidewalk users. Public Works, phenomenal accomplishments, so many, and obviously those are close to my heart. I would ask to include making the sewer service fee fair as a goal of the sewer rate study. So currently condominiums, each owner of a condominium pays the same amount as each owner of a house on a property. And I don't see that as fair. It's a lot less sewer line to service a condominium than it does a house. And the flow rate to that sewer line is usually less on average. Recreation community services, an amazing breadth of services, just stunning. I also appreciate, obviously, the budget that the proposed net expense over the next 2 years remains the same. Even though there's some increase in total expense, there's no increase in net expense because they're increasing the revenue as well. So a somewhat self-sustaining department. And on the community services division side, I think it would be useful for the accomplishments to recognize that that division has led the increase in the number and share of very low-income households that are garnering the tax relief that the Albany voters have provided. So when I first started tracking this 15 years ago, there were only a handful of households that secured this relief. It's over 200 now. It's almost a quarter of the households indicated by the census. And I would ask that in the goals that a reasonable, reachable, appropriately modest goal to continue increasing that be included in their goals, or in that division's goals. Community development, again, so many achievements that I so appreciate. Particularly the one that's less known that I want to note is taking care of long-standing nuisance properties. Those don't affect the entire city, so they can be less known, but they're very complicated situations, take a lot of work. So I don't want to let that pass. I want to let people know that that department has done that work, which makes all the difference in the world of the quality of life of the people who live near those houses. I would also encourage adding an accomplishment regarding the mandatory soft story multi-residence building retrofit program. So that's not currently in there, but Tier 1 has hit on that. So there are buildings that are being retrofit, have been retrofit. So I think having an accounting of how many building owners have been engaged around that, or whatever metric the department wants to put through. But that's an important achievement for the safety and resilience of our community. And with that, I'm done. Thank you for your tolerance.
Oh, thank you for your contributions. Do we have any other folks on council that?
I'll go. Again, I want to thank you and all of the staff. I know you all worked really hard on this, and we have a balanced budget. And I hear so many cities talking about their budgets that are millions of dollars in deficit, and I'm like, oh, we have a balanced budget. We're cool. And it's a realistic budget, and I really appreciate that. I think echoing what others have said, that this is really concrete and solid, and I really like the format of the report. Having said all that, I've also said, since I've been back on council several times, that we just need to be careful and cautious about how we spend our money. Not panicking, but just really thinking through how we spend money, because these are very uncertain times. And I know our reserve balances are not what we need. It's a good start. And just a rhetorical question is how we're going to fix that going forward. Because we're going to need to always be remembering that that's a place we're going to need to put money. And so as we're thinking of how we spend our money over the next year, we have to remember all these things.
Thank you.
As a member of the subcommittee and being here at council, I appreciate this being the second time that I got the presentation. But as I said in the meeting last Monday, I really appreciate all the effort staff has put in. I really appreciate that the effort taken to look at our budget and understand what have we actually done in the past, what have we actually received in the past, so that we can have faith that our budget. All right, let me back up. Previous budgets, I was always concerned that it always looked like we had a giant deficit. Last time we did this, looked like there was a giant deficit. And then the story was, well, we've never actually realized that deficit because of this, for all these things. And I appreciate that you've taken into account the trends in the past to be able to tell us we can realistically expect this. Yes, there's variability and things we can't control, but this is more true to what we should expect to happen. And so it's incredible, and that it gives you all and us a better understanding. What does it mean that we're actually at zero this year? I said this at the last meeting. It gives me a little bit of heartburn of what that means about 26, 27, but I think I am taking very much to heart what you said about we will not know what that number is for another 6 or 9 months because there's so many things that go into that. And I can't remember if I asked this question last Monday, but I think the one question I would continue to ask is just when, if I remember correctly, I think it is the pension obligations that we will have to pay are updated annually. What month is that, or generally what time of year?
So every year in August, we get the calculation of what the payment will be for the following fiscal year. And they give us estimates of a few years out, so that's what's built into 27 is the numbers we got last August for FY26 and an estimate of 27. So in another few months, we will get 27 and an estimate of 28, 29, et cetera, understanding that there is a 2-year lag from CalPERS investment results for the first time they show up in our required payments. And then there's a 5-year ramp up or ramp down depending on the results.
And I thank you for remembering all of that off the top of your head. It definitely was ringing bells as to what we talked about last Monday. But I think the importance there is that, you know, that graph that we saw that showed our payments over the next 10 years to CalPERS, those numbers can swing dramatically. They are tempered in the sense that it really takes a little bit for them to tell us what did they actually make and then adjust what we have to pay. But those numbers can go up. And just knowing that under previous expectations of what the numbers were going to be over the next few fiscal years, we are going to be in a deficit. I think I would echo what the Vice Mayor says, that we really have to start being cautious about what we agree to fund, or make it clear to those things that we are funding that are incredible to have as a community, but are not essential to us as a city to function, that my preference would be not to drop on them the fact that we can't help fund them at all, and that there's an understanding that these organizations understand that we are being more cautious about how we fund them. Should we happen to have more money and they need more money, you know, they always have the ability to come back to us, but I do want us to be cautious about, think cautiously about how we spend money over the next few years. Because the turmoil in the stock market that we all have seen, or potentially have seen in our own accounts, I mean, that is CalPERS, right? I mean, that is CalPERS numbers are going up and down daily on their returns. And the long-term effects of that on what we may owe are unknown, but I anticipate it's going to be more than what we have estimated. All right, and that's, again, I'll just end with, on a happy note of thank you, staff, and thank you for giving us a balanced budget.
Actually wonder if because of the 2-year delay, it's going to get better. Because if you think back 2 years, what was going on at the market was advancing pretty strongly, as it was last year. So it's going to be a while. I'm not saying we should be complacent, but I'm saying we might actually get results that would lull us into a sense of not remembering what happened this year. You know,
we might get a little bit of a reprieve, but
yeah, because I mean, I think that's happened in the past, right? The total UAL unfunded actuarial liability has gone down, and then it's gone back up, and you know, so it's not only up; it can go both ways. But in the end, you got to try to smooth that out.
I appreciate that you remain hopeful. Just checking, does this require a motion by councils? So, unless we have any other further input from council.
I just want to say thank you so much for your leadership and for the staff's hard work and efforts in getting this done. This is really, really exciting, and I celebrate the zero for all of us.
And yeah, just to reiterate, thank you, and I look forward to the day where we can all wear a T-shirt that say "Balanced Budget." But yeah, that closes out.
Technically, we vote on this on June 2nd. So.
Yeah, no bad ideas. Thank you again, and that will close out item 8-1. I just want to do a temperature check on council. Do you all feel like you need a 5-minute break?
I would appreciate a 5-minute break.
All right, we will take a 5-minute break and come back at 9:06 p.m. Okay, welcome back, amazing humans. We call this meeting back to order at 9:09 p.m. And we will come back where we left off at item 8-2, our annual sugar sweetened beverage tax study session. And I'll drop it to staff.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Lopez. I'm Isabel Leduc, your Assistant City Manager. In November 2016, Albany voters approved Measure 01, a general tax on sugar-sweetened beverages, which we call SSB. Per the ordinance language, the City Council is to hold a study session annually to receive input and recommendations regarding the expenditure of proceeds from the tax and solicit recommendations from several organizations, including city advisory bodies like the Recreation and Open Space Commission, RISE, and the Transportation Commission, a designated representative from the Albany Unified School District, and individuals with specialized expertise in areas such as public health issues and programs related to diabetes, obesity, and sugary drink consumption. Next slide, please. As part of the study session, Council also receives information on currently funded programs. So the Council approved the fiscal year 24-25 sugar-sweetened beverage tax expenditure plan, which includes expenditures for continued funding for the Crossing Guard program during the school year, the bike safety program, which teaches elementary school students street riding, funding for Move and Groove, an event held this year on April 27th to promote outdoor exercise through a 5K course around Albany High School and Memorial Park, the Albany Swims program, a pilot program by AUSD to teach young children how to swim, and partial funding to the Giltrack Community Farm to support curriculum development, and 25 AUSD field trips to the UC Giltrack Community Farm. Attached to your staff report, you will have found progress reports for these programs. Slide 3, please. For fiscal year 2026, recommendations regarding the expenditure of proceeds from the tax have been received from the City's Parks Recreation Open Space Commission, the Transportation Commission, and AUSD. A renewal letter from All City Management Services, the company retained by the city for crossing guard services, is included for the 25-26 school year. Next slide. So this table demonstrates all the recommendations received and dollar amounts when provided to continue the programs into fiscal year 2026. There is ongoing support for the Crossing Guard program, bike safety program, Move and Groove, Albany Swims, and then new programs include installation of water bottle filling stations at Ocean View Park and Ohlone Greenway, and sand volleyball court at Ocean View Park. There's also a request for by AUSD for an additional Crossing Guard location near the middle school. And next slide, please. Yes, so the city's finance department, as mentioned by the city's finance director just a few minutes ago, projects that $226,000 in revenue will be collected in fiscal year 2026. Per the voter-approved ordinance, the SSB tax is general fund revenue that the City Council aims to apply towards the specific purposes related to health and well-being, and approved expenditures are incorporated into the city's annual operating budget. As mentioned by the city's finance director during the budget item, the fiscal year 25-26 operating budget as proposed is balanced, assuming that programmatic expenses related to SSB revenues total no more than what has been budgeted, which is $226,000. Any expenses beyond 2026 will result in a fiscal year 2026 budget that is no longer balanced or requires reductions in other areas of the budget. So the next step is pending direction from council. Staff will work to include the projects and programs given a high priority by the council in the city's budget. I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from members on City Council?
The questions about the sand volleyball courts at Ocean View. So am I remember correctly that I thought that was part of our capital improvements discussion 2 weeks ago?
Yes, it is, and the funding source will come from a mixture of different funds. So as a more shovel-ready project, it is an opportunity for this funding source, but not necessarily the one and only opportunity.
And then a question about the installation of water bottle filling stations. So it sounds like both of those are replacements of existing water fountains so that there's no, it's really just on-site, pull out one machine, put in a new machine. There's no new plumbing or, is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I think the one across the street from the senior center that won't replace the existing one. It will supplement the one that is there right now.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
Along the lines of the proposed water station, are those also things that could be potentially morphed under a public work project?
Sure, we have an overall revenue source for facilities and infrastructure. So potentially as those certain projects in that nexus are under development, we could incorporate those improvements as well.
Thank you.
Oh, really quick on the water filling stations, because I know I've brought to the attention before is we've had some of those stations that have been put in but are no longer functioning properly. So, and I don't know if that was taken care of, but one in particular was near Memorial Park, where it looks like it hadn't been used in a very long time. So I just want to make sure whatever kind of infrastructure we put in, that it's being maintained and kept up, that we're not just putting these dollars to put these things out there and then letting it go. So I don't want to waste that money.
Question, Councilmember Jordan?
Well, first, I will second that. Big fan of keeping what we have working first. Is the $226,000 projected? That's the projected revenue for this fiscal year? Is that correct? So it will be available for next fiscal year?
No, it's the next fiscal year. So it's what we're going to be collecting starting July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026.
Is there a projection for this fiscal year?
Yes.
Maybe it was in there and I missed it. I apologize.
I mean, as of 10 months into the fiscal year, we have $183,000 collected. So,
Okay.
2 more months is about 220.
Okay, thank you. Has staff determined or have a more founded hypothesis as to why there was such a precipitous drop? So recollection is 3 fiscal years ago, the revenue was almost 300,000, and then it dropped to 200,000 in 1 year. It dropped by a third, which would be great if it was because consumption went down, but I just don't believe consumption went down by a third in 1 year.
I think it may be a mixed, a variety of reasons. Turnover in the businesses during the pandemic has, probably had some effects on that. But we haven't been able to pinpoint exactly, the reason why the tax went down so sharply in 2024.
I guess that could be delayed pandemic, but I mean, 2023 was $295,000, and that was pretty deep into the pandemic.
I mean, I'm just going to offer my
Please.
potential insight. I've noticed a lot more of these types of beverages that are not sugar-sweetened beverages, right? But they're using more fruit additives, and we're seeing a more complex, grouping of offerings out there to be alternative to sugar. So I think that the market itself has just been marketed more towards less sugar type beverages.
That's great. I mean, I hope that's the explanation. I'm not used to seeing such a step change in the public health world like that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this side of the dais? No? Not seeing any other further questions. We will take it to public comment.
Hi there, everyone. I am Drew, the aquatics director at the Aquatic Center. I just wanted to say this year we have about 100 people participating in it. Last year was about 118. It could end up going 118, 19, so on and so forth. Just depends on the outreach that we have. The parents do appreciate it because they do get free swim lessons. And any support you give to us is appreciated, especially from the parents. Learning to swim is, as we all know, very important. So that's what I was going to mention and comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Sophia Lopez, and I grew up here in Albany, and I still live here. I actually was one of the healthcare practitioners that received a letter in the mail. It was very interesting because I'm an herbalist, body worker, and full spectrum doula and educator. And I had this idea for a while of wanting to start a community herbal medicine garden. And I had the idea of reaching out to the City of Albany or maybe Berkeley, so I live kind of close to the border, about creating a project like this as a city promoted project. And I received this letter and I was like, oh, well, why didn't I come to this meeting and just propose this idea? It's aligned with health and feels fitting for this tax. And so, yeah, I guess it's a new idea beyond what's already promoted, so I don't know how the budget would align for that. But my idea is basically starting a community garden that's focused on medicinal plants that would have an educational component. So there could be community workshops teaching people how to work with medicinal plants. There could be a growing food component too, although a lot of community gardens already focus on food production, so it could be an interwoven piece of those two things. So yeah, that's my idea.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello, my name is Linda Wu from Albany Unified School District. I just want to thank you for the historical support that you have provided to Drew and our aquatics team on providing increased number of swimming lessons to our most at-risk youth. I saw that from the historical letter that we provided you that they've increased actually the number of lessons from 81 to well over 145, and I think he's still generating interest. So I just want to thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comment.
Well, I'm Kim Trutain. I'll round out the AUSD trio here. Again, I want to express our deep thanks for all that City of Albany has allocated in previous years through the SSB for a number of different programs, some of which we've been able to pick up on our side, and some we're still asking for your support. Our new superintendent, Superintendent Sarah Stone, sent over a letter, which is part of the packet. I'm sure you've read it. And our highest priorities, every single one of the projects that have been talked about here and was listed are excellent. I wish that they were all doable plus more. But through Superintendent Stone, our highest priorities must be the crossing guard program. She brings your attention to the intersection in front of the middle school, particularly the Ohlone Path, Masonic, Brighton area, feeling that that could really use some support either in future infrastructure or in a crossing guard in the coming year. Also, of course, we are very much in favor of active transportation. We support that strongly on our side as a school district as the way that we want our students to get to and from school. The city's support on that has also been very much appreciated with the bike paths and all of the other measures that have been put in place to make it safer to ride in Albany. And we appreciate the bike rodeos, the bike safety programs that are, that are happening on our campuses and allow kids to get some real experience, not just casually, but by instructors on how to ride safely on the streets. And then lastly, the Albany Swims program is really the way that our low-income students, maybe the only way that our low-income students are able to get swimming lessons. And as a coastal community, I think it's really important that that our children be taught water safety, how to swim, so that they can be water safe. I did note that in the update letter for Albany Swims, the last sentence before the closing asked that that the council continue to support at $20,000 level. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. This is Lucinda Young, Albany resident, and I understand that the sweetened beverage tax, sugar sweetened beverage tax, although it's a general revenue, went to the general revenue, it is supposed to be used to support health and well-being. At least the city council aims to use it to support the health and well-being of the community. Really happy to see most of the uses that this has been put to in the past, the crossing guard program, safe routes to school, other support in the school district. I do, however, think that it should be reserved for events or for activities which have as their primary purpose the health and well-being as opposed to entertainment for our community. And I think the Move and Groove event is a great community event, but its primary purpose is entertainment, not health and well-being of the community. And I think if the city wants to support that, that's great, but it should not come out of the sugar sweetened beverage tax fund. Also, just wanted to put a shout out. I like Sophia Lopez's suggestion. I hope the council will look into that further. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure. Hi, my name is Eugenie Shu, and Lucinda just spoke about Move and Groove. I'm here to talk about that as well. I wanted to thank the City Council for supporting it all these years. We had our 4th annual event, and I'm speaking on behalf of the committee of 5. We actually see the Move and Groove as a combination of a fitness event to live music. So the primary event is focused around exercise, and we had about 400 people enrolled, all the way from babies, because they were sitting in strollers, all the way to elders. And we really see it as an opportunity for families and people of all ages and fitness levels to participate in a fun event. I consider it a fun run or a fun walk. Steve Trutain, my co-founder, sees it as a competitive athletic event, but that's because he's that way and I'm not. But in any case, it is, I believe, a great use of the community funds through the sweetened beverage tax, because we are really encouraging people to exercise and showing them that they can have fun doing it. It doesn't have to be a chore. It can be done to music, and it can be a very joyful event, as it has been. And so thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. All right, looks like that concludes our public comments. And it looks like we up here got quite the task, as always, every year around this time. And I'll just preface it with acknowledging I know this process is not the easiest for us every year. It seems like it gets more and more challenging. The tax is doing, I think, what the original intent and purpose was, to reduce purchases and consumption of certain beverages, but cost of things do go up. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I think, of what we would like to entertain prioritizing, I do just want to toss out there that there could be potentiality to consider our discretionary fund at a later time. It's not agendized at this point, so I just want to make that clear that if that comes up, probably not the appropriate time to discuss any use of our discretionary fund this evening. But those could be opportunities for other sources of funding for things that are in front of us. And always excited to hear when folks bring new ideas, so I do appreciate the bravery of coming forth with comments, and I do wholeheartly encourage, I believe it's Sophia Lopez, that's a very awesome last name. Do encourage you to, definitely reach out to city staff, reach out to either one of us here on council to see how that idea could further develop if it doesn't feel like it gained traction this evening discussion. But at any rate, just want to preface it with that, what our options could look like and how we could dance with this. Right now, I have Vice Mayor McQuaid in the back of my ears right now from the last couple council meetings about we need to be careful. And I think this is one of those moments, especially after hearing, all the excitement about potentially balanced budget. I want to be careful, but I also want to support the many great things we got going on in this community to the extent that's fiscally responsible. And I'll let either one of you start taking your jabs.
I'll put a proposal on the table just to get it going. So apropos of what I said before, that I actually have reason to take the numbers as they are now, I'm certainly committed to staying within the projection for myself. I think there might be some useful information that the city manager can contribute. I know in email there was some discussion with the superintendent about that 7th location, that additional location that was desired for a crossing guard.
Sure, yeah. In trying to get clarity on the concerns, first and foremost, which I appreciated learning more about, and I think that we have an opportunity to work through the perceived concerns as we continue forward with our active transportation plan. Let me just note that first and foremost. Secondarily, to the interest in crossing guard at this location, some experience has been that school district personnel have willingly staffed that location, and there may be an opportunity for that in the future. I think that is a wonderful potential partnership, and happy to look into that further across our agencies. In terms of staffing an additional location at this time, I would also note that if it is done through the contract service provider, that also means when that person is not attending or present on that day of work, it necessitates our police department crossing those intersections, which, as you know, with a limited police department staffing at any given time, could also impact public safety overall. So that's a consideration, and demonstrating further that the opportunity for partnership across the agencies with regard to existing staff may be a nice thing to look into, primarily here at least.
And I would note that if that 7th position is funded, then that takes it to almost not quite the entirety of the 226. So given that information, my my preference is to fund the current locations. I don't have an estimate for Albany Swims, so I guess I might ask, is the representatives here, is the idea to continue it at its I think it was $20,000 funding level? Seeing affirmation. Thank you. And then whatever's left to put at the bike safety program, which I think would be 17,000 or so if I've done the numbers right. So it'd be a little over 15,000. But reading the report, I saw that Ocean View, the grade that has the safety training at Ocean View had the 2-day class, which includes an on-road, riding on road after a day of training on the campus, and Cornell and Marin did not. So through the mayor's suggestion to talk about our discretionary funding, I'm hoping when we have that conversation with this slight bump up here, we can maybe complete the funding so at least 2 of the schools have the 2-day class instead of just one of them. And with that would be the 226, and everything else could be left to future conversation.
Thank you for your input. Vice Mayor McQuaid?
I was just going to ask Preston a question. So what are you suggesting for the bicycles?
So it would be the 18. So there's 188,407 to continue the crossing guards.
No, just the 35 for bike safety. What are you suggesting?
Right. Well, what I'm suggesting, the math is, we fund the crossing guards, we fund Albany Swims at 20,000, which brings it to 208,407, and then the remainder, which is I think 17 something, goes to the bike safety classes. So this $35,000 number included a number of components from the Transportation Commission. I think it included more full funding for that elementary school classes so that each campus would have a 2-day class. It included classes for, in the higher level schools, in part due to the concern with e-bikes that have come online, and included, I think, also a portion of the funding of that $35,000 was for classes at the community center for adults with regard to e-bikes, which I appreciate all of that, but we don't have the money for it. So I think that a remainder of 17,000 approximately would really be just for the elementary school classes to continue. And like I say, at a future conversation, we might add a little bit to that, see if we can get at least 2 of the schools to the 2-day class.
Did that clarify, Vice Mayor McQuaid?
So, one of the things that we funded last year was kind of the kicking off of the Giltrax farms, and that's not a number that's been presented up on. I haven't seen a number on any of the spreadsheets that were shown. I just want to clearly identify that is something we funded last year. It is a program that was piloted. It started. They've learned a lot. I'm assuming that program could not continue if we do not fund it. I'm not necessarily saying that has to come from the sugar sweetened beverage tax, but I will say in the long term, fitting in the crossing guards are an important thing that I think the City of Albany has to continue to provide, and we need to continue to work with AUSD to find a way to make sure that we can work together to make sure that it's fiscally responsible how much we can spend. I have felt for a while now that we need to find a way of moving this out of the sugar, being funded by the sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, because while it does promote children and parents walking, biking, getting to school, it just provides that safety for people to feel more comfortable get there without getting in a car. I think a lot of the other programs that we are not funding because of that are things that are additional lifestyle changes that are important. So Giltrack Farms, just healthy eating, what it means to actually grow your own food, the swimming program, the bicycle program. would love for us to see, as it was described, a middle school e-bike, but beyond e-bike, really e-mobility, right? Like having a training course on like what does it mean to ride an e-scooter, a one-wheel, an e-bike, because at that middle school, high school age, that is when most of the kids are starting to really get into that, and they are learning on their own. And so I am simply saying, for this year, I don't know that there's much that we can do. We do not have budget in the general fund elsewhere. But we have to find another source of funding for crossing guards long term.
I can offer that I've been wanting to add a CPI adjuster because unfortunately the tax was passed as a penny per ounce with no accounting for CPI change. So both the incentive to change what one consumes is reducing, and then obviously the revenue is reducing, both because consumption is going down and also because the value of a dollar is going down through time. So there are two cities that passed SSB measures last election. Berkeley passed a measure making its SSB permanent, whereas it was 10 years. And Santa Cruz passed a measure adopting an SSB. So I'm tracking what the industry does in response. As of this time, the industry has said some things about Santa Cruz, but there's been no particular action. I haven't found any indication that it said anything about Berkeley. And then the reason I'm tracking this is because maybe in 2026, we think about putting a measure on the ballot to add a CPI if the industry is not taking action on those other cities, and that could immediately, increase its revenue to keep up with inflation, which I think would make a big difference in the way that you're talking about. In terms of finding another source for the crossing guard program, I mean, it's all general fund revenue, so yeah, I don't know that that's really viable unless there's like some non-general revenue, general fund source out there.
Yes. I think, this comes back to the question of volatility, right? Like we had averaging about 260,000 a year. For whatever reason, we hit 295, and then we dropped to 200. And now it appears to be going back up to 220, 230-ish range. But that's always going to mean we're going to have volatility about funding. Essentially, the primary thing we are funding is the crossing guards. And so I think it is still imperative on us to work with staff to help figure out another way of funding that. Because there may be a day where there's not enough funds to even cover that, given that those costs keep going up. I will just add my comments on the water. I asked specifically about the volleyball courts because I do think that is something that we as a community should move forward with, but I think that's a capital improvements program. And I think the 2 water bottle filling stations, I think that's a matter of maintaining what we have, and what we already have is water fountains that don't work. And so again, that to me is more of a general fund capital improvements. I'm not sure where that comes from, but that's a different funding source. So I'm comfortable not including those tonight. But I do want to acknowledge that those are things I would love to get seen done. It's just not from this funding source. I don't know what kind of impact $5,000 has on Move and Groove, not providing the $5,000. It is an event that I participated in 2 years ago. My wife, last year, wasn't going to happen for us. This year, my wife was asking me in December, are we signing up for Move and Groove? We did not, but she was asking, and I know that got her super excited. And just as reference, we often talk about these efforts as things that are for our children. 2 years ago, that was the first 5K my wife had ever run. The first time she'd ever thought about running a race. And so that was huge. That actually convinced her this past year she participated in the triathlon. So she's always been more of a swimmer. And so she participated in the triathlon. And so when we talk about some of these events, like, yes, they are parties in a big sense, and they are something that engage the community, but it is not only about our youth and exposing them to other forms of exercise or whatnot. I should say my wife has run. She just never ran a race. So I do want to emphasize that I do think events like Move and Groove are important for us as a community, and it really is exposure to all ages, as opposed to many of the programs that we're talking about. They are our youth, which is important, but our youth also has PE. Our youth also has other things, so just throwing that out there.
You can go.
I'm looking at the wrong person, sorry. Yeah, it'd be great if a big sack of money just fell down and we could spend it. That would be great. That's not happening. I would like the school district to think a little bit more about the swim program. Obviously, it's near and dear to me. It's important. I think maybe we could have a partnership where y'all contribute a little bit more. You know, I can remember very clearly the days when every elementary school class from K through 5 had swimming lessons, and they walked over to the pool and they had lessons, and it was great. And maybe, you know, think about that. That serves all the children. And you know, by 5th grade they could all swim. And when we got to high school swimming, kids that had gone through Albany schools were all in the deep end, and the kids that transferred in were all in the shallow end. So it's you know, it's the school district's pool, and I think you need to think about creative ways to use it for students of the school district. Saying that, perhaps we could fund part of it, you could fund part of it. Yeah, I think, Preston, you've got a good idea about the bike rodeo, or the bikes. Maybe do the elementary and not the middle school, the adults, all of that piece. And I do think Moving Groove, in fairness, I didn't work on the committee this year, but I volunteered and I've been on the committee in the past. I would like to see us give them some money. I do know that they carry a balance forward at the end of the year. They do, you know, raise some money because they charge fees. And the city also does give in-kind donation with some staff time. So I'd like to maybe think about having that be $2,500 for this year. And John, you've often talked about kind of weaning people off. And I think maybe this is a way to look at that. So, well, I changed my number, so now I can't tell you what it was. But if we could do maybe 10,000 for swimming and a little bit less on the bikes, and
So
crossing guard as is.
At 2,500, were we to fund the bike safety program at the 15,000 that we allocated last year, we would be even. So we'd essentially taking 17,000, changing that to 5,000, and putting 2,500 in the Move and Groove event. And my math says that brings us to 225,907. We have $83 to allocate still.
I have 93.
225,907.
Rena, don't spend it yet. She's getting itchy over there. Okay, so that's my thought.
So I've just been crunching numbers and looking at how things could potentially look like, possibly providing partial support where possible, and then maybe revisiting, offsetting what we can't through SSB, through maybe discretionary funds. The onus should likely be on those entities to come forth with the request and demonstrate the further need. And I would love to, you know, support some of these programs at full scale requests, but just fiscally at this point, it's just not feasible. The numbers I do have right now, though, are funding for half of the request for the bike safety program at 17.5. funding the crossing guard program for 188,407. Funding Move and Groove at this time through SSB for 2,500 for 2.5, and then Albany Swim for 10, which should bring us around just above 218. What I'm trying to do is stay under that 226. I don't want to get. I'm trying to stay under 220, in all honesty, but I think that is a good, fair distribution of the things that are before us, and I think it gives time for folks to maybe come back to us if the need is, if there's still a clear need to request anything from our discretionary funds. I'm more than happy to hear other folks entertain the way we dance with these numbers, but this is where I'm landing out right now, and that makes me feel comfortable. I think there's definitely opportunity where I think we would be in agreement to provide additional support down the road. But I think for all intents and purposes, for our preliminary prioritization in this evening for a recommendation, this is where we could start off with. This doesn't mean these are the numbers that are set in stone, but this does give a nice initial launch point for us, city staff and community, to work with and to get a sense of, okay, how are we going to be more strategic looking forward. And I do also just want to acknowledge, I hear that the crossing guard program, funding it right now through SSB, is not sustainable, even though it goes in the general fund, it's all in one. Not a conversation for now, but definitely something we do need to address in the very near future. With that said, again, I'm open to hearing what other folks might have in terms of options or allocation. Repeat?
Repeat your numbers.
So 17.5 for the bike program, 188,407 for the crossing guard program, 2.5 for Move and Groove, and 10 for Albany Swim, which should bring us about 218,407.
Okay.
I knew that math degree did me some good.
Mayor, to be clear, so this is funding specifically from SSB, but should organizations who maybe perhaps weren't fully funded would like this council to consider funding them more when a future agenda item comes in front of us, which I will be proposing later, that would be an opportunity for them to come to request more and make a case for potentially more funding, either for, it sounds like we didn't fully fund, we didn't fully fund everything that could have been done on the bike program. We didn't fully fund everything that could be done on Move and Groove, Albany Swim, and we provided no funding this year for Gill Tracks Farm, but that when we talk about council discretionary funds, that would be an opportunity.
Precisely, and very well could be that maybe one day I'm walking and doing a hike up Albany Hill, and I look under a rock and I find an extra $200,000.
And that missing Spanish gold?
Yeah, and that changes everything. But I think that's the benefit of acknowledging that this is just a preliminary prioritization. Similar, we've heard community member Sofia Lopez also bring an intriguing new idea, and that's something that could be entertained further down the road for something that's a bit more fleshed out. So I do want to keep that window and line of communication open for folks. And again, I think this is probably the most fairest distribution given the constraint that we're dealing with. I know I've said this recently, like our job here on City Council, we're not able to make everyone happy, but if we can at least do our job in making sure that folks feel visible and that their requests and their voices are valid, then we're at least doing something right. But yes, these are the numbers I've conjured up. Again, I'm not going to force any of you to be like, yeah, we need to do what Mayor Lopez does. Because if Councilmember Hanson Romero is like, we want to fund nothing, I'll listen.
Slash it all. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm so grateful to our community. We're coming up with, events and programs and things. And yes, I wish we, would find that, magic money tree somewhere. Everybody go check on Albany Hill, see if it's up there. But I think what you're proposing, and I feel like a consensus among all of us is that we feel very similar in these numbers. We'd like to be able to do it all, but it's just not possible. And I'm always, the proposal that Ms. Lopez came up with tonight to speak about, I'd like to see, I don't know if maybe working with the Giltrack farms, and maybe there's a way to partner with them and work with them as well. That might be possible. Really like what Vice Mayor McQuaid had mentioned about the Albany Swims. I was one of the students. Although I didn't really actually graduate because I liked Mabel too much and I was short, so I hung out with her in the shallower end. But realistically, that was something that I always looked forward to in school when I was at Cornell, was being able to go for, I don't even know if it was like a week. I can't remember. It was 2 weeks. We went with PE. 8
days.
Yeah, and we walked up there and we got our lessons and, walked back, and I remember my little flower cap. So that is something that I'd like to see if maybe could be brought back, through the school district like that. I'd like to see if maybe with regards to the e-bikes and the bike safety and stuff like that, my question is, with a lot of these e-bike distributors that are out there, new businesses and stuff like that, could, there be some partnership with the manufacturers of these bikes to create these programs, grants into the community? Because they're selling a lot of these things and they're making their money. I'd like to see them, make that community shift safer. If they want to sell more of these e-bikes, then maybe their incentive would be to help make sure that people are safe in using them. So that would potentially be a suggestion. Move and Groove, I'd be happy to kind of help, help with finding other funding, not necessarily through the city, but maybe more sponsorship opportunities. I've done a lot of sponsorship through Albany Little League, through, the choir in the schools and theater programs and stuff. And so I think that there is an opportunity that they could fill up the rest of that with some additional sponsorship. So, but I think that your proposal kind of meets our needs for this evening.
Did I make a suggestion, though? Mm-hmm. Preston, did I jump in front of you? Since we are at 218, would you consider 15,000 for swimming? Adding a 5, so it's still a bit of a partnership, but.
For.
So that would take it to 223.
Yeah. Me personally, I'm comfortable at most going up another just another 2, because like I said, I don't want to go above that 220. But
I mean, I guess I would counter if we were to put the bike program back at 15,000, we would be able to fund the swim program at 15 and still keep a good buffer between how much we're allocating and how much we expect to receive.
I'm hearing support to go up to 15.
15 for swim and 15 for bikes.
And my math brings us to 220,907.
That makes me feel good. All right.
Councilmember Hanson, remember, I'm really intrigued about this idea of partnership with e-mobility providers. We have a provider of e-mobility within our community as a service, and whether or not they have a program in which, you know, they can help fund some training, essentially to use their devices. And then we have so many bike shops, and in particular in the general community or region, other mobility providers that might be willing to chip in to help do some of this training. May not be solely aimed at students, but it could be more open to the general community. El Cerrito ran a really wonderful, I don't remember the name of the event, but it was a mobility event that had e-bikes, regular bikes, trikes, GEM electric vehicles, and then a whole bunch of community organizations presented about different mobility things that were going on. You know, thinking about that, what they did, and whether or not that's something we could do either on our own or coordination with City of Berkeley, which at least the last few years I keep seeing that there's some kind of like bike radios or e-bike radios. So, but I really like those thoughts.
All right. I think we may be somewhere where we can all comfortably move forward. I'll just check in. Councilmember Jordan, you good? I'll go ahead and work on this, delivering this motion, because I know the numbers have been tossed a bit.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, as it formalizes into the budget.
All right, so I would motion for our preliminary prioritization for funded item through the SSB tax for fiscal year 2026, that we allocate $188,407 for crossing guards, $15,000 for the bike safety program, $2,500 for the Move and Groove event, and $15,000 for Albany Swim.
I'll second.
City Clerk.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember McKee,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuay,
Yes.
Mayor Lopez,
Yep.
Councilmember Hanson Romero.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Good job, team.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yeah.
Just wanted to offer my encouragement to Ms. Lopez to develop a proposal. I know it can be disheartening going through this whole process, but I will mention the GO Tract, went through it 1 year and didn't get any funding, and then the second year they got the funding that hopefully is startup funding. The superintendent did say the school district is in a position out of contract with the GO Tract for field trips, so I'm certainly hoping that that will happen since we invested the startup funding in getting that going.
Yeah.
Thank you for attending.
And I would also encourage exploration. UC Village has a whole series of community gardens, so there may be a group there that's willing to work with you also to dedicate some of those plots to medicinal growing of plants. And then, as you mentioned, there are a whole series of community gardens neighboring us in Berkeley. So.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I'll just emphasize being a resident of the village, please, if you want to be connected to the folks who run that, the garden over there, please feel free to reach out. And all of our respective contacts are on the website. All right, with that said, we are into item number 12, council subcommittee reports. And we'll start off on this side. Councilmember Hanson Romero.
Well, let's see. Well, I'm like, John, Councilmember Mickey and I attended the AC Transit, help me here, it's every couple of years, right?
Update.
Yeah.
You could just call it an update.
An update. And very excited. Some of the things that I was excited to see was the more frequent buses coming through on Solano Avenue. I think that that's going to be a huge benefit. Now, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's now going to be every 15 minutes for...
Yeah, so they mentioned this 18 and 52 will be every 15 minutes. If I remember correctly, at one point the 18 was every 12 minutes, but my understanding is they're changing it to every 15 minutes for a longer period of the day. And they also mentioned, if I may,
yeah, please.
72 and 72M are going to be running every 15 minutes until 1 a.m. And so that's a big change, so that more users have access longer in the day. The one slightly odd change is the 72R, which is the rapid, which has fewer stops, is changing from every 12 minutes to every 30 minutes. And so it'll be less frequent, but it will be faster. And I think the balance there was that the 72 and it allows them to keep the 72 and the 72M running every 15 minutes and allows them to run those buses longer into the day. They've really emphasized that they are still recovering from the pandemic. They're at 85% of what they used to provide before the pandemic, and they are facing a $43 million deficit this coming fiscal year, which they can cover through their reserves. But that deficit, like most agencies and most municipalities, will grow. And I think the next fiscal year is $57 million, and I don't remember what the rest of the chart showed, but it keeps growing. So. And they also mentioned 95% of their expenses are fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Not a room to squeeze.
However, they are still hiring more drivers, and they're actively trying to, keep pushing forward to encourage more ridership. They talked about potentially, I believe, going to the cashless system, more all Clipper card related, as well as some of their programmings for teaching those who want to go towards more vocational, so that they can work on their own buses and the education program that they're providing or helping fund. Yeah, so I was really encouraged to hear that, and they're actively trying to hire more people to be bus mechanics, and they will pay for training and putting forth a great program there. Yeah.
I'm worried about the 72. So that the council took a position in favor of AC Transit staff's recommendation, which was to unify all 372 lines, remove some of the local stops, so you'd be somewhere in between the R and the local. And that would provide more consistent service, because while their schedule says every 15 minutes, going back and forth between 72 and the M, and then every half hour for the R, the reality is on that street, like most streets, they can't stay on schedule. So it could be half an hour easily, somebody's standing there waiting for a bus. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's my concern. But the board made the political decision to keep the 72R.
They did not, one thing that I would say, they did not describe in any level of depth whether or not all the stops will remain. They did talk about using technology that our fire department wants, which is as a bus or a fire truck approaches the intersection, that the light stays green longer. They are talking about really pushing over the next few years, moving bus stops to the far side of intersections, both from a safety perspective, but also from a bus driver's ability to then merge with traffic. It's much better to be on the far side of an intersection. So they are looking at operational improvements, but they did not mention whether or not they were removing any stops. So it'll be interesting. Two other things they mentioned. So July 1st of this year, fares increase, and I hope I got this right, from $2.50 to $2.75, and the Transbay increases from $6 to $6.75. So for those of you who ride the bus, either the Transbay or the local buses, those prices are going up in July, effective July 1st.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, I was unable to attend the Stop Waste meeting at the last minute. So I have no updates for that right now. So, and I'm trying to think, JPA, I met that, we already talked about that, right? Did I? No? Okay. So I did attend that meeting, and part of the conversation, sorry, the sports field, they're going to be adding some additional infrastructure down there. They're really happy about the roundabouts that have happened down there because it's helping now bring forth the sewer line, needing to be able to install the restrooms down there. They're talking about, while they're doing a bunch of construction down there, there was some movements on where they're going to be staging certain things and how people are going to be able to park down there. And also, one of their requests was they were hoping AC Transit might have a closer line coming down that direction. I did mention that to AC Transit because at this point, the closest bus station to get to that sports field is all the way up on San Pablo, which is a challenge for kids coming from different areas. There was a recommendation that I made, being a parent who was often grabbing all the sports equipment for the entire team and pushing my daughter in a stroller at the time and trying to make it to the field and everything else that you're doing as a parent. It's really difficult when you have to park so far away and then try to walk all that stuff in. So I did make the recommendation to have some 5-minute loading, unloading spots, which they really like that idea. So I think they're going to incorporate that into the plan to try to give some relief to some of us parents who are trying to juggle everything. So I was happy to hear about that. But exciting to hear some of the additional work that's being done down there. And then also there was some reports on the amount of usage that the fields are getting. And so it's great to hear that those fields are really being used basically to their fullest capacity. But yeah, so.
Thank you. So I was also able to attend that, and it was striking the difference between the usage on the artificial turf fields and the grass fields. So the grass fields are absolutely seasonal, and the maintenance staff just did a major overhaul because it had not held up well, the grass fields. But the artificial fields are pretty much used at capacity year-round. And one thing that they mentioned is a little bit of an enforcement issue they're having to deal with, where every year people have an opportunity to essentially bid on or request time slots. And then there is a way to challenge to try and get a time slot. And they were running into issues where organizations were forming a larger umbrella or group of people and kind of working together to challenge for time slots, and then reallocating between.
Yeah, they were working the system.
Yeah. So they are actively working to close that loophole, and it will be a little bit more of a challenge for those who are looking for field space, but it is, as described, is not onerous what they're being asked to do. So.
They're just trying to make it as fair and as equitable as possible, so, yeah.
What I will say is that it just continues to highlight the demand for more sports fields across the East Bay.
Only good fields. So I attended the PPLC, I can't remember what it stands for, of the Alameda County Transportation Commission, and I think the hot item remains the SB 63, which is written as a authorization to put a 3-county 0.5%, well, 2-county 0.5%, 1-county 1% sales tax on the ballot to deal with some portion of the fiscal cliff that AC Transit, BART, and Uni are facing, and there's LAVTA is also in there trying to, potentially get involved. There's a 5-way every week discussion going on between the executive directors of the transportation agencies for the 5 counties, which the other 2 additional counties are San Mateo and Santa Clara, which together the ones that essentially stopped the prior iteration of this in the last legislative session. So see what happens. Alameda County Mosquito Abatement District, I learned at the last meeting, or maybe the meeting before that, but I've been learning about catch basins. I think I mentioned before, I'm working with the agency on highlighting approaches to create self-drying, draining catch basins, because a lot of catch basins, they have a pool of water at the bottom because the outlet pipe is above that. And I find this just incredible to believe, but they treat on the order of 100,000 catch basins per year to suppress mosquito production. So I did acquire about a gigabyte of data from East Bay Municipal Utilities District on groundwater table levels, because if that level's above the base of the catch basin, then that precludes some options. So anyway, that's proceeding.
Thank you. Vice Mayor McQuaid.
Okay. With the mayor, I attended the mayor's conference, which was actually on a ferry in the bay. I'll let him talk more about that. I attended a housing commission meeting. We hired and met the new deputy executive director, Kemet Makawa. And in March, HUD notified all the housing authorities that funding for the emergency housing voucher program, which was part of the American Rescue Plan and intended to go through calendar year 2026, basically is done. We thought it was going to go a little bit longer, but apparently it's pretty much done. So they're trying to figure out strategies to take care of the families that had emergency vouchers. We received the audit report. It was a clean report. I'm happy to say Albany now has 13 vouchers, up from 11, which is due to the project-based vouchers at the Saha project. And June 28th is the Family Self-Sufficiency Resource Fair, which different vendors come in and talk about how to buy a house and all different kinds of things. And Albany Rotary has made a financial contribution to that. I was also with several of you at the Bike to Wherever Day, and then came down here for coffee with the cops. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Mickey.
So last Monday, participated in the subcommittee which covered the budget, so I'm not sure there's really a report back on that. Ride Anywhere day, I was able to stop at the Albany station for a little bit, stopped at the El Cerrito Plaza station, stopped at the El Cerrito Del Norte station, did not see one in Richmond on my way to the AC Transit report back session. It was a really wonderful event, as Councilmember Henson Romero reported. A lot of great data, some sobering numbers, just in terms of they have a hiring freeze on all non-essential personnel, which means if you're not a bus driver or a bus mechanic, you're pretty much not hiring. And they recognize that they need to continue to bring in new bus drivers, and particularly actually the mechanics, because they have a kind of a silver tsunami they expect over the next decade. And so they are really pushing that forward. They have a really innovative program, and Councilmember Hanson Romero mentioned a little bit, just a training program for working on EV buses. So actually EV and hydrogen electric buses, it's completely virtual. And so they're able to do a lot of the training through VR systems, and a trainee can do that at home or at one of their yards. And that's a program that they're really excited about because it's first in the nation, and it's kind of leading the charge in kind of new ways of approaching things. They are super excited about their EVs and hydrogen electric vehicles. They really see that as the future. They didn't mention it this year, but 2 years ago they mentioned that they tend to prefer the hydrogen electric because the hydrogen electric, they can refill hydrogen relatively quickly and get the bus back out on service. The EVs, they just take a little bit at the time, and I think it's still the situation where if there are rolling brownouts, they are affected by rolling brownouts. And so they are leaning more towards, they had been leaning more towards the hydrogen EV vehicles. So, and that's it for my report out.
All right, thank you very much. For my report, as you heard, Vice Mayor McQuaid and myself attended the mayor's conference in Alameda. I did leave feeling a little bit jealous. We rode on a ferry. I don't know how to top that. With the mayor's conference coming here next, I joked to Mayor Ashcroft that I would take them to the lake in Albany. She asked, "There's the lake in Albany?" I said, "Yeah, at the puddle in Ocean View Park that that my son splashes in." True story. But no, it was great, and it was also very wonderful to hear a little bit more about aquatic transportation and the many benefits of the SF Bay ferries. Additionally, so the ABAG does have our first, we do have our General Assembly coming up later on in June, so hopefully I have something to report on before we go into recess. I did attend our Marketing Regulatory Legislative Subcommittee meeting for AVA. A lot of that was just informational and hearing, just giving the laundry list of all the different bills that could potentially come before the state. So nothing quite flushed out, but just giving us a very high-level overview of what's going on. And in terms of things out and about in the community, did co-sponsor a table for Bike to Wherever Day, along with local nonprofit and local business, and also had phenomenal help from city staff. I just want to give a shout out to Sid and the crew over there in the Albany Community Center for making things feel far less stressful than what they could have been at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday, especially the day after cruising around on a ferry late into the night. And it's well attended. I want to highlight that I believe we had 462 folks come through on wheels and just through that intersection at Marin and Masonic. And so that was very beautiful to see folks of all ages. Attended Movie in the Park, watched Mamma Mia. I don't know if my chief of staff was too thrilled about it, but he put up through it. Bless his little heart. Also attended the Comic and Fandom Expo. That was very new for me. I was like, I want to see what this is all about. So this past Sunday, or yesterday, I guess, went to go see what that was all about. Chief of Staff absolutely loved it, walked away with a few books, and also saw some local folks in Albany who were vending. So it was really nice to be able to support some of our local businesses. Also had the opportunity to attend to attend Albany High School's field day at Cougar Field, which was hosted by Albany High's Youth Athletic Wellness Club. It was the first time doing this, and they have initiative to help support underserved athletes in the East Bay, and I thought that was a really cool and novel thing that they were doing there at the high school, and hope to see more of it. Really wish they put something forward for SSB funds. And then also had the honor of being invited to attend what's known as the Kennedy King Memorial Scholarship Banquet that's held annually in Concord. I'm a previous Kennedy King scholar. This is the award that goes to community college students who are going on to transfer that attend school within the Contra Costa Community College District, and there were a handful of folks from Albany who live in Albany that were also there, and they're super excited to see the mayor there, so it always feels good. And then lastly, I had a really fruitful and productive meeting with recently installed Police Chief Pittman for UC Berkeley, and so just a lot of conversations around what we could see and do better around the UC Village specifically. Looking forward to more productive conversations on what just overall safety can look like in the community. And with that, that concludes my report. I'm assuming no public comments. I will move on to future agenda items. Does anyone on council wish to forward anything for a future agenda item? Not seeing anything. Anyone? Oh, you got something, John?
Just that we have put a request out for those who receive funding to come back. Sorry. We put out a request that those who are seeking funding to come back to us when we discuss our council discretionary budget. We don't really have a meeting that is about the council discretionary budget, so but I would love for us to consider putting that on the agenda. Maybe, well, I'll leave it to staff to find an opening in June or July, so that we can help these organizations understand what funding, while we weren't maybe able to provide all the funding through the sugar beverage funding, whether or not there are other sources of funding they might be able to get from the city.
Sounds good.
So if that could be in June, hopefully, before the recess. Let's say before the August recess. That would be wonderful. But I also know that the city manager has a very, very tight schedule of each meeting that we have. So,
yeah. Sounds good. No other agenda item from council members. Any future agenda item from members in the public? Seeing nobody. And we are at 10:26. I would like to motion, because me and Vice Mayor McQuaid do have something to read, to extend the meeting by 10 minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Hanson Romero,
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan,
Yes.
Councilmember Mickey,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McQuaid,
Yes.
and Mayor Lopez.
Yep.
It's extended for 10 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 14, announcements of city meeting and events. Memorial Day is May 26th, so city offices will be closed, and we do have several meetings coming up that you could find on our website. The reason I wanted to make sure we extended and had time was because Vice Mayor McQuaid had divvied up a couple obituaries for her and myself to read in honor of a couple recent residents in Albany who have passed away and who have significant presence. And so I would ask Vice Mayor McQuaid to go ahead and read the first one for Karen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just sadly, Karen Carlson Olson, a longtime resident of Albany, recently passed away. She was born in Delta, Colorado, graduated from Cal State LA in 1969 with a BA in Fine Arts. She moved to Oakland, where she met Henry Hankelson, whom she joined in a 6-month hitchhiking tour of Europe. After their marriage, they moved back to Oakland and then moved to Albany in 1991. During her son's school years in Albany, Karen was a very active volunteer in all aspects of school activities, including emergency preparedness, sports, music, and various fundraising programs. She served as president of the Albany High School PTA and on committees to get parcel tax initiatives on the ballot. She was an active volunteer with the League of Women Voters in getting students to register and vote, and later worked as the office manager of the local LWV of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville. One of Karen's greatest loves was traveling, and she managed to visit over 25 countries and many states during her lifetime. Her other great passion was gardening. She worked miracles in their small lot in Albany, transforming it from a barren dirt patch to an ever-blooming flower garden, which she drew upon to provide bouquets to friends and family. Other hobbies were weaving, arts and crafts, cooking, and reading detective novels. She is survived by her husband, Hank, who still lives in Albany, her sons Lawrence and John, and numerous other close family members. She will be fondly remembered by all who knew her for her wonderful sense of humor, infectious laugh, organizational skills, strong advocacy for women's rights, her kind and generous spirit, and as a loving wife and mother. A memorial gathering in Albany will be scheduled later this summer.
Thank you, Vice Mayor McQuaid. And what I have is something in recognition for Carol Fitzgerald, which kind of took me aback when I had found out that she had passed away, especially because it was just several short months ago when she was here giving us flyers for an event at Albany Hill. And it reads, Carol Fitzgerald, a remarkable artist, environmentalist, activist, teacher, and inspiring force, recently passed away. Her life was a beautiful, long, adventurous, and artistic journey filled with wonderful friends, colleagues, and neighbors. Carol was a champion for the preservation of Albany Hill and challenging development for over 30 years. She served as president of the Friends of Albany Hill, helping to organize the annual Monarch Thanksgiving Count and the annual celebration of Albany Hill in December, as well as other educational programs. Recently, she spearheaded a community art project called Symbiosis. This mural, located along Jackson Street on the east side of the hill, depicts the butterflies that inhabit Albany Hill and the plant that they depend on. Each butterfly species is accompanied by the host plant on which its caterpillar feeds. Carol's art has received numerous awards, and one of her watercolors has been exhibited at the renowned Red Rock Gallery in Colorado. Other paintings are displayed in the Albany Library and various homes in Albany. In addition to her artistic pursuits, Carol taught art at City College of San Francisco. Carol's memorial near Albany will be announced and held in August. And with that said, I just want to have a quick moment of silence for both of these long-term community members who we lost. Thank you very much, and thank you, Vice Mayor McQuaid, for making sure that they were rightfully acknowledged. And I think it's very important to acknowledge some of the mavericks in our community, especially the women in our community who have done our community good. Unless any other council members have anything else to add or to say. Yep.
There was one additional person that was quite influential who recently had passed. I don't have anything prepared or anything on it, but for those of you who remember Walker's Pie Shop on Solano Avenue, Doug Walker recently passed away, and his sister is still a prevalent property provider. It has owns some of the restaurants, the family, I should say, but Doug gave a lot to our community, and so there'll be a service for him later on in September. The day after the stroll actually is, and they're having it. So
thank you for making sure Doug is acknowledged as well. And with that said, I join this meeting at 10:33 p.m. Thank you, everyone.